Chapter 372. During lunch, Murphy had a taste of Yang Yi's strict upbringing. Everyone at the dining table was busy eating. Even if they spoke, they would only say a few words. For example, Yang Huan praised Yang Yi's cooking. Then, under Yang Chonggui's glare, he kept quiet out of fear and continued to eat. The only one who had the privilege to speak was Cici. The little girl was not affected by the atmosphere at all. She told her grandfather and father about the new things she had encountered during her adventure in the yard while pointing at the dishes she wanted to eat. Yang Yi was about to pick up some food for Shi, but Yang Chonggui was faster. He reached out with his chopsticks and picked up a large amount of food into Shi's bowl. All of a sudden, the food piled up like a small mountain. "Grandpa, I can't eat anymore. There's too much." Shi held the small spoon and did not know where to start. "It's good to eat more. It's good for your body," Yang Chonggui said to his granddaughter with a smile. Shi did not like to have so much food piled up in her bowl all of a sudden. She would be sad if she spilled her favorite meat on the floor. Fortunately, Yang Yi came to help his daughter. Under Yang Chonggui's murderous gaze, he took half of the food in Shi's bowl and said, "Give it to Dad. If you want more later, Dad will get more for you." They ate in silence and finished their lunch quickly. After a while, it was already afternoon. Yang Yi was called out by the young men from the same village who knew him to go out and have fun, so Mo Fei took Cici upstairs to take a nap. The little girl didn't get enough sleep in the morning, so she began to yawn when eating. The entire fourth floor was theirs. There were 2 big rooms next to each other, but there was very little furniture. The room they were living in now had a bed, a wardrobe, a desk, and 2 chairs. In the whole room, only the bed and bedding that Murphy and she slept in were new. The desk and wardrobe were moved from Yang Yi and Yang Qing's room. It was clean, but it looked old. There was even a ballpoint pen doodle on the desk that Yang Yi used to draw. The room next door was even simpler. There was only the bed that Yang Yi used to sleep in. It was not used yet, but there was a mattress for good luck. Just now, when Yang Yi was here, Mo Fei didn't feel anything. But now that Yang Yi was not here, and there were only her and Cici, Mo Fei felt that this room was a little empty, and a sense of strangeness arose suddenly. Of course, Murphy did not dislike it. She knew that Yang Yi's house was good enough. According to Yang Yi's introduction, the old house was the oldest in the village. There were 3 small rooms that could only fit the family of 5. Compared to the houses that she had seen in the car today, Murphy felt that she was very lucky. At least she was still living in a building. She heard that the tiles had not been laid yet. But wasn't this better than those old houses that were dark and dusty? Not all of the old houses in Anqing province could be called Hui-style buildings. Shi, what do you think of Grandpa's house? Is it fun? Murphy turned to Shi. She stretched her arm out of the blanket and gently touched her daughter's little face. "It's fun. Mom, Grandpa said that he would take me to a very fun place in the afternoon." The little girl turned over to face her mother and smiled sweetly. "Also, let me tell you, Grandpa has 2 little calves. They're very small. They're not as big as Mom." Murphy secretly heaved a sigh of relief. After listening to Shi's description, Murphy knew that she did not care about the simplicity of the house. She was still immersed in exploring new things. That's right. Children don't have as many twists and turns as adults. They are still very easy to satisfy. She was like that now. When it came to fun things, she became excited and no longer felt sleepy. "Then go to sleep. When you wake up, you can go play with Grandpa." Murphy smiled and used her finger to scratch her daughter's nose. "I don't want to sleep. I want to go play with Grandpa." The little girl still acted coquettishly. "No, if you don't behave, Grandpa won't like you anymore." Murphy pretended to be unhappy. "Okay then, I'm going to sleep." Cici closed her eyes obediently. However, her thin eyelids were still moving a little. Her eyeballs were probably rolling around inside, and no one knew what she was thinking. It was close to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Yang Chonggui held Shi's hand and walked leisurely on the small road in the countryside. The little girl had just woken up, but she was very energetic. She kept looking around curiously. However, some people who passed by were also curiously sizing her up. She's dressing was very different from the other children in the village. Naturally, she would attract other people's attention. She sometimes felt embarrassed from being stared at. She quickly walked a few steps faster and stuck close to her grandfather. "Old Yang, whose child are you bringing?" Finally, an old man who was of the same generation as Yang Chongguei asked, "Your boss's?" "Yes. Iron's child." "Look, is she pretty?" Yang Chongguei proudly raised his eyebrows. In the past, he was very serious and had a fierce reputation, so the younger generation didn't dare to take the initiative to talk to him. But once they started talking, the neighbors in the village also started talking at the same time. "Beautiful, the children in the city are beautiful. Old Yang, your family is rich now. Iron gave you money to build a house, drove a big car back, and married a wife in the city to have a child. But why do I remember that he only brought her back this time? I didn't hear that your Iron had a child before." "Yes, I didn't bring her back before. We didn't build a house and had no place to live. I was afraid that the child would be wronged." Yang Chongguei smiled and fooled them. He didn't want to tell them the truth. Moreover, when he talked about this, his anger towards Yang Yi came out again. "Grandpa, where are we going?" Fortunately, Shishi's tender voice pulled him back from thinking about how to deal with Yang Yi, this unfilial son. "We're almost there." Yang Chongguei pointed to the front. "Turn the corner and we'll be there." After turning the corner, the scene in front of them suddenly opened up. There was no longer a crowded and small house. A wide and flat field appeared in front of Shishi. Hua hua. It wasn't the time for spring plowing yet. Moreover, it was close to the spring festival, so most of the young people had nothing to do. On the field, there were two people wrestling in the field, but the bystanders ignored them. They didn't even look at them, not to mention trying to stop the fight. They just minded their own business and played with stone locks or other weapons. Yes, weapons. There were a few weapon racks here, but compared to the ones in the Yong family's hall, the quality of the weapons here was a little worse. However, there were sabers, spears, swords, halberds, axes, battle axes, hooks, tridents, and so on. "Yong Shi, this is the village's martial arts practice field. Your grandfather built it himself." Yang Chongguei proudly introduced to Shi. He wanted to hear his granddaughter's adoration. However, Shi didn't cooperate. She anxiously pulled on her grandfather's sleeve and pointed to the two men who were hugging each other and rolling around on the ground. She raised her head and said, "Grandfather, they're fighting." "It's not good to fight." "They're not fighting. They're just practicing martial arts and learning from each other." Yang Chongguei hurriedly explained. "Chong'en, that's enough. Don't go too far. It's winter and you're ruining your clothes like this. When you get back, your mother will beat you to death." Yang Chongguei shouted. His voice was loud and clear, like winter thunder. At this moment, the old and young men in the martial arts practice field noticed Yang Chongguei's arrival and greeted him. Mu Chang'an and Li Shupo, who were sparring with each other just now, also quickly let go of their hands and got up from the ground. As if they had done something wrong, they obediently called out, "Teacher Yang." "Teacher Yang?" She curiously blinked her eyes. The scene in front of her was quite magical. Many people were greeting Yang Chongguei, and most of the young people were fearfully calling him Teacher Yang. Yang Chongguei was also like an emperor on a private tour. He held Shi's hand with one hand and put the other behind his back. He nodded as he walked past, his face glowing. "Practice well. Men should practice martial arts so that they won't be bullied in the future." Yang Chongguei reached out and patted Mu Chong'an and Li Shupo's shoulders as he encouraged them. It was the first time the two young men had received his encouragement. Their bodies stiffened as if they had been touched by Medusa. However, Yang Chongguei wasn't satisfied. She was just curious. She didn't show any surprise or adoration. Chapter 373. Yang Chongguei led Shi through the middle of the martial arts practice field. She followed her grandfather with small steps. She nervously looked at the people holding spears and swinging axes. After several conversations about Shi's identity, Yang Chongguei took Shi to an empty place. "Yang Shi, Grandpa will play a trick for you, okay?" Yang Chongguei's dignified appearance was swept away. With a smile, he kindly said to Shi, "Okay." She happily clapped her hands. Her reputation as the king of support was not undeserved. Yang Chongguei nodded with satisfaction. He pointed to the big stone weight on the ground that seemed to weigh 60 to 70 pounds and said, "First of all, Shi, you take this stone weight and see if you can lift it." Shi curiously looked at it. She really did as her grandfather taught her. She grabbed the handle of the stone weight and wanted to lift it up, but how was that possible? The little girl used all her strength, but the big stone still did not move. "You can't catch it, right?" Yang Chongguei said to his granddaughter with a smile. "This is a big stone. It's so heavy." The little girl pouted and shook her head at her grandfather. Not being able to lift it, Shi was a little unhappy. "Grandpa can catch it, do you believe me?" Yang Chongguei patted his chest and asked. However, Shi did not shake her head. Instead, she nodded seriously. "Do you really believe it?" The little girl did not play by the rules. Yang Chongguei's prepared words were choked in his throat. It was very uncomfortable. "Grandpa is very powerful." She was still as supportive as always. She added, "My papa is also super powerful." "Forget it, let's just use our real skills." Yang Chongguei asked Shi to stand aside. He walked to the stone weight and bent down to grab the handle of the stone weight with his right hand. With a steady exhalation, Yang Chongguei lifted the 60 to 70 pound stone weight with one hand. Wow! She seemed to have forgotten what she had just said. She cried out in surprise and stared at him closely. His granddaughter's voice made Yang Chongguei feel as if he had been injected with chicken blood, and his mood became agitated. "Rise!" He roared again, raising the stone lock high above his head. Actually, Yang Chongguei didn't shout because the stone dumbbell was too heavy. Yang Chongguei did it on purpose. He probably put on a posture that made it look like it was very difficult for him to lift it up, but in the end, he still lifted it up. The effect was also very obvious. She stared straight at it. The little girl clasped her hands in front of her and looked at her grandfather nervously, afraid that the stone lock would fall down. Following that, Yang Chongguei really gave it his all. He played with the stone lock until it looked like a flower. Lifting and chopping were all child's play. Single flower, flipping flower, floating flower, side arm, side horse, and so on. A series of moves, a heavy stone lock flew up and down. It was as heavy as Mount Tai and as light as a butterfly. It was dazzling. Shi watched until she forgot to cheer. Finally, Yang Chongguei came up with a difficult lock on the elbow. He threw the stone lock up and then caught it with his elbow. This move was very thrilling. There was a sense of danger that the stone lock would smash this white-haired old man into meat paste. She watched in fear and surprise. She only breathed a sigh of relief when she saw her grandfather catch the stone lock. However, the cheers of the surrounding villagers entered Shi's ears, and the little girl became happy again. "Uncle Guei is still old but vigorous. You little rascals who play all day long, why don't you hurry up and learn from Uncle Guei?" The middle-aged man from before said with a smile. She roughly understood his slightly accented Mandarin and couldn't help but puff out her small chest. "How is it? Grandpa's stone lock, is it good?" Yang Chongguei put down the stone lock, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and asked with a smile. After all, he was almost 70 years old. Although his body was still very strong, it was not as strong as it used to be. "It's good." She jumped on the ground and said happily, "Grandpa is super awesome." Yang Chongguei finally saw the admiration he wanted to see in his granddaughter's eyes. He was gratified and smiled while stroking his beard. Dinner was still prepared by Yang Yi and Murphy. Murphy could help with one more thing: watching the fire. Originally, Yang Yi didn't want Murphy to do this. Sitting in front of the stove, the smoke and the fire burned. However, Murphy learned how to stuff firewood and how to unblock the vent to make the fire burn brighter. She liked this job and insisted on watching the fire for Yang Yi. Yang Yi put the plucked and gutted chicken into the pot to cook. Then, he looked at Murphy, who was staring at the firewood, and said, "You worked in the kitchen with Mom at noon. Later, do you know what Mom said about you?" "What did she say? Did Mom tell you?" Murphy was nervous. She stood up hurriedly and looked at Yang Yi. Yang Yi deliberately said expressionlessly, "She didn't tell me. Yang Huan helped you sound her out and then told me." "What did she say? Did she say that I'm stupid and can't do anything?" Murphy looked at Yang Yi's face and asked sadly, "Of course not. Mom praised you. She said that you're hard-working and a good woman." Yang Yi suddenly laughed. He rubbed Murphy's head with his palm. His fingers were not clean. "Ah!" Murphy couldn't believe it. She asked stupidly, "Really? Mom didn't see that I can't cook?" "She saw it. How could you not see it with your mediocre cooking skills?" "But my mom didn't care about it. She saw how hard-working you were, so she gave you a passing grade." Yang Yi drew a line in front of his chest. "You're lying. It's not a passing grade." Murphy became smarter this time. She hammered Yang Yi's arm in embarrassment and said, "You just said that Mom praised me." "I am a good woman who lives a good life." Mo Fei repeated this comment with a joyful smile on her face. "I've always felt that you're good at living. That's why I like you so much." Yang Yi pretended to be jealous. "Why didn't I see you feeling gratified by my evaluation? You're a big baddie. You even lied to me." Murphy giggled as she playfully twisted her body. At this moment, Shishi came back from the training ground with her grandfather. The sky wasn't completely dark yet. The little girl couldn't wait to run to the kitchen and tell her parents about her experience in the afternoon. What training ground, what rock dance, what broadsword playing, all of these were new to Shishi. Murphy wasn't surprised that Yang Yi's father knew martial arts. But she noticed a problem and asked Yang Yi, "Is Dad a teacher?" Yang Yi nodded and said, "About 20 years ago, the town said that it was too hard for the children in our village to go to the town's primary school. Every time we had to walk more than 10 miles on the mountain road, which was unrealistic. So they made our village use an empty house to build a primary school. They also sent teachers over, but they lacked a physical education teacher. Our dad was in the village and often taught those people martial arts. So this job fell on his head. He also got a salary, so he agreed. So now many people call my dad Teacher Yang." Yang Yi waved his hand. "Then Dad is quite amazing," Murphy said with a smile. He himself quite enjoys being called. Yang Yi shook his head with a wry smile. After dinner, Yang Huan and Murphy were cleaning up the dishes and preparing to wash them in the kitchen. Dong Yuera and Yang Chongguei looked at each other and said, "Tai Zi Murphy, there's something I've always wanted to ask." "Mom, go ahead." Yang Yi nodded. Have you and Mo Fei held a banquet in the city?" Dong Yuera was worried that Murphy would think too much. She waved her hand and said, "I don't mean anything else. In our village, there's an unwritten rule. When you get married, you still have to hold a wedding banquet and invite friends and family to gather. Only then can your relationship be considered confirmed." Chapter 374. Wedding? Get married? Yang Yi showed a confused expression. He had never thought about this question. Perhaps it was because he was used to not following the rules. He used to think that it was enough for two people to be together, even if they were a stable couple. The concept of marriage had never appeared in his mind. Hearing his doubts and seeing his expression, Yang Chonggui's face immediately darkened. "You two are not married? You haven't registered your marriage?" Dong Yuer frowned and asked. Murphy lowered her head and stood beside Yang Yi like a little daughter-in-law. She did not dare to breathe loudly. She was not wrong, but when questioned, Murphy felt as if she had joined forces with Yang Yi to deceive the two elders. She felt very uneasy. Do we have to register our marriage? Yang Yi honestly asked his question. Bang! Yang Chongguei slammed the table, causing everyone's bowls and chopsticks to jump. Yang Huan and Yang Qing lowered their heads at the same time, not daring to look directly at the old man. Even Shi, who had finished eating early and ran to the side to play by herself, was shocked by the noise. TZ, your words are getting worse and worse. Did you learn bad things after staying outside for a few years? Dong Yuer saw this and interrupted. Murphy gave birth to your child. How can you let her down like this? No, what I mean is, even if we don't register our marriage or hold a wedding, I will still spend the rest of my life with her. What's the difference? Yang Yi explained, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Murphy was stunned. She stared blankly at Yang Yi. She was touched by Yang Yi's words, spend the rest of my life with her. From his point of view, that was indeed the case. Yang Yi did not think that a marriage certificate could make two people happy for the rest of their lives. Love needed to be carefully managed by two people. It could not be bound by a marriage certificate. You unfilial son, our Yang family doesn't have a scum like you who plays with women's feelings. Yang Chongguei angrily rebuked. Dong Yuer's interruption just now had no effect. Yang Yi shut his mouth. From the memories of his previous life, he knew that when the old man was furious, any further explanation would only have the opposite effect. Talking back would only make Yang Chongguei even angrier. The child is already 4 years old. If you don't marry Murphy, won't others laugh at us? This time, Dong Yuer did not spoil Yang Yi. She helped him and said, Tai Zi, you have to think about this carefully. Consider what? I think he must have been blinded by the outside world after he retired. He doesn't even know the most basic principles of being a person. He has completely forgotten the teachings of his ancestors. Yang Chongguei slammed the table and angrily rebuked. Yang Yi avoided the limelight and remained silent. On the other hand, Murphy was panicking. She quickly opened her mouth to explain for Yang Yi, Dad, Mom, don't blame Yang Yi. It's not his fault. It's because of me. I'm working now, so I can't make our relationship public. That's why we can't get the marriage certificate. What? Yang Chongguei and Dong Yuer both looked over in confusion. Yang Yi quickly pulled Murphy and whispered, Are you stupid? Why are you sticking your head out? Leave this matter to me. It's my problem. I can't let you bear the responsibility for me anymore. Murphy pouted and said, What? They're talking about the marriage certificate. I really didn't think about it before. Yang Yi waved his hand and turned to his parents. Dad, Mom, don't listen to Murphy's nonsense. I didn't think it through. He was also worried that Yang Chongguei and Dong Yuer would have a bad opinion of Murphy. It wasn't easy to make them accept Murphy today. He couldn't let it go to waste. Yang Chongguei stood up with a sullen face. Come with me, old man. Dong Yuer hurriedly called out. Don't worry about this. Yang Chongguei waved his sleeves and walked to the courtyard with his hands behind his back. Yang Yi stood up helplessly and wanted to follow him. At this time, Murphy grabbed his hand. Yang Yi turned to look and saw tears in her eyes. It's okay. Don't worry. Yang Yi gently patted Murphy's hand and signaled to her with his eyes to his mother. Go and wash the dishes with Huan Huan. Yang Yi followed Yang Chongguei to the courtyard. Then Yang Chongguei took out the key and opened the door of the ancestral hall. The ancestral hall was an independent tile-roofed house. However, there was no electric light inside. There was only a dim kerosene lamp and a few red incense sticks flickering. Yang Chongguei didn't say anything. He took a lighter from the square table in front of the ancestral tablets and lit the 2 candles on the table. Only then did the ancestral hall become brighter. Kneel. Yang Chongguei didn't look at him. Instead, he stood in front of the ancestral tablets with his hands behind his back. With his back facing Yang Yi, he looked up at the ancestral tablets. Yang Yi hesitated for a moment and helplessly knelt on the futon. This action was very clear in the predecessor's memory. Before the predecessor was a soldier, he was often punished to kneel. After kneeling, Yang Yi didn't say anything for a long time. It was as if he was ignoring Yang Yi. However, Yang Yi still satisfied him. He knelt there with his back straight and didn't say anything. Now that you have some money, you forget your ancestors. If I give you a few more years, will you abandon your wife and children? Yang Chongguei turned around and snorted. How do you say this in the ancestral teachings? I'll recite it for you. Eccentricity is natural, repentance is inevitable. Decadence and self-satisfaction make it difficult to establish a family. Tell me, what does it mean? Yang Yi knelt on the futon and was silent for a moment. Then he said, eccentric, self-opinionated people will often do things that they regret. They will miss a lot of things that they cherish. A decadent, lazy, addicted, and unmotivated person will also find it difficult to establish a family. These ancestral teachings, in the past, Yang Chongguei made the 3 siblings copy and recite them. If they couldn't remember, they would be beaten. How could Yang Yi not remember? In front of the ancestral teachings, you have to think about it for an hour and see where you went wrong. If you can't figure it out, you can kneel here tonight and don't go back. Yang Chongguei waved his sleeves and left Yang Yi in the ancestral hall. He left the door ajar and walked out. In Yang Chongguei's opinion, Yang Yi was getting more and more outrageous. If he didn't teach him a lesson, he would be too arrogant. He also knew that someone would try to persuade him, so he didn't stay at home. He would come back later. Yang Huan had been watching secretly. Then she quickly ran to the kitchen and reported to Murphy, who was panicking. Sister-in-law, my brother must have been punished by my father. I heard it. It seemed to be an hour. Yang Huan whispered to Murphy. Ah. Murphy was about to cry. Yang Yi was punished because of me? It's not all your fault. My brother is an idiot. He shouldn't have said that and annoyed my father. Yang Huan took Murphy's hand and said, but don't be afraid. An hour is a light punishment. Last time, my brother got drunk and got into a fight with the villagers. My father whipped him twice and punished him to kneel for a night. The next day, his legs didn't even belong to him. But it's so cold now. Murphy's eyes were red. She said, where is Yang Yi? I'll go accompany him. Chapter 375. Murphy could not enter the ancestral hall, not to mention that she was not listed in the Yang family tree. Even if she was, she could not enter the ancestral hall. The ancestral hall of the Yang family was quite open. Because of the heavy casualties in the war, Yang Chongguei was the only one left in the family. Therefore, Yang Chongguei had the final say in the rules. In the past, he did not allow Dong Yue to enter the ancestral hall, saying that she could only enter once in her lifetime. Later, he could not dissuade his wife, so he reluctantly changed the rule that all the women in the family could enter the ancestral hall to worship the ancestors together during festivals. But now, Murphy could not enter the ancestral hall, and Yang Huan did not dare to secretly bring Murphy in. If the old man saw it, Yang Huan would be beaten up. What should he do? Yang Huan rolled his eyes and said with a sly smile, got it. Follow me. Yang Yi knelt in the gloomy ancestral hall. The cold wind of the night kept coming in through the crack of the door. Fortunately, his body was strong and he was not afraid of the cold. Therefore, he calmly knelt down. In his mind, he was still criticizing the tradition and ignorance of his old man. He felt that the saying, eccentricity is natural, in the ancestral teachings could be applied to his old man. Of course, he was just criticizing Yang Chongguei's way of doing things. Yang Yi had already figured out the reason why Yang Chongguei blamed him. He realized his mistake. Someone once said, the essence of a person is not an abstract thing inherent in a single person. In reality, it is the sum of all social relationships. After all, he was still living in this world. He could not turn a deaf ear to social customs just because of his casual attitude. He was also a man with a family. Even if he looked down on the binding force of the certificate, he should know the significance of the promise to Murphy. In the quiet ancestral hall, Yang Yi thought a lot. However, the silence was soon broken. A faint rustling sound came into Yang Yi's ears. In the dim and quiet ancestral hall, it was very loud. Yang Yi frowned and looked over. His hearing and eyesight were very good, so he quickly found the source of the sound. Then, he saw a pair of eyes in a ventilation hole in the corner. The eye blinked and then retreated. "Sister-in-law, look, Big Brother is inside." Yang Huan's voice was heard. After a while, a pair of familiar eyes appeared at the entrance of the cave. It was Murphy's. Yang Yi recognized her immediately and saw her sad expression when she saw him kneeling there. "Murphy, it's not a big deal. I'll stay for another half an hour or so. You should go back quickly. It's cold outside." Yang Yi spoke before she could. Murphy heard it. Although it was a little fuzzy outside, she heard the second half very clearly. She pursed her lips and stubbornly said, "No, I want to accompany you." "Why are you accompanying me? I'm not cold inside, but you'll freeze outside." "Fool, listen to me." "I don't want to listen to you. I don't want to see you being punished for me." Murphy finally held back her tears and talked back. "I'm not being punished. In our family, it's normal to be punished. If you don't believe me, ask Huan Huan. Do Yang Qing and I get punished often?" Yang Yi coaxed her. Yang Huan also pulled Murphy and said, "Yes, it's only an hour. It's okay. Let's not wait here. Otherwise, when my father comes back, things will be worse." Murphy was persuaded to leave by Yang Yi. However, she did not go back peacefully. Instead, she went upstairs to get a coat for Yang Yi and asked Yang Qing to bring it to him. Then, she went to find Dong Yue. Although she was a little nervous without Yang Yi, she still plucked up the courage to tell Dong Yue about her and Yang Yi's current work situation. She explained why they were not married yet and wanted Dong Yue to help her reconcile. At this time, she still did not understand what had just happened. She ran over, held her mom's hand, and asked, "Mom, where is Papa?" Now that it was dark outside the big house and she couldn't see anything clearly, Cece was a little scared and didn't dare to explore the courtyard again. However, her parents weren't playing with her, and her most adorable grandfather wasn't around either. The little girl finally felt bored. Murphy pulled she into her arms, gently stroked her hair, and whispered, He has something to do now. He'll be back soon." But Dong Yue looked at Cece with a smile, and an idea came to her mind. She said to Mo Fei, "In fact, what I usually say has some effect. But now the old man is angry. He won't listen to anyone. It's useless for me to persuade him. If he makes Tai Zi kneel until dawn, he will not recognize his family. But I think there is one person who may be useful to persuade him." "Who?" Murphy asked anxiously, like a drowning person grasping at a straw. "Little Yang Shi," Dong Yue said with a smile. After a while, Yang Chonggue came back slowly with his hands behind his back. He was not in a hurry to talk to Yang Yi in the ancestral hall. Instead, he went back to the hall and saw Dong Yue. He ordered, "Yue, pour me a cup of tea." But as soon as he sat down in the armchair, a little girl walked over with a teacup. "Grandpa, I'll give it to you. Have some tea." She's clear voice came before she arrived. "Io, put it down. Give it to Grandpa." "Why are you serving Grandpa tea? What if it's hot?" Yang Chonggue looked anxious. Before he could even warm his seat, he hurriedly got up and went to greet his granddaughter. He took the teacup from her hands and scolded her. It's not hot." She smiled sweetly at Grandpa. Yang Chonggue touched the edge of the cup. He had a rough idea. He took a sip and put it down. It was not hot. The tea was warm. It seemed that someone had already prepared it. "It's not hot. This is a porcelain cup. If it falls, it will hit your foot or cut your foot. Young Chong-gue picked up Shi and sat on the armchair. Although he was talking to his granddaughter, everyone knew who he was talking about. Grandpa, Grandma said that you locked up my papa. She pouted and said, Grandpa, don't be angry, okay? My papa is not a bad guy. Okay. Shi said while shaking Yang Chong-gue's hand. Even if Yang Chong-gue had a heart of stone, he would not be able to resist such a childish act. But your father didn't do something well, so Grandpa is angry. Yang Chong-gue explained. But don't lock him up, okay? I'm scared. She said sadly. Papa is disobedient. I'll ask him to apologize to you, okay? Papa said that if you know your mistakes, you're a good child. Don't be angry, okay? The little girl's voice was soft, and Yang Chong-gue didn't know how to deal with her. He couldn't harden his heart to Shi, and after being coaxed by his granddaughter, his anger had already dissipated. Okay. I won't punish your father. Shi, don't cry. Grandpa promises you that your father will come back immediately. Yang Chong-gue saw that Shi's eyes were red and quickly said, Really? Shi held back her tears and looked at her grandfather in surprise. Of course, Grandpa's words are a gentleman's words. Grandpa will ask your father to come back now. Yang Chong-gue looked at his granddaughter's surprised eyes and immediately patted his chest and said heroically, Grandpa, you're so nice. Shi leaned over and kissed her grandfather on the cheek. At this moment, Yang Chong-gue, who was still a little stiff, couldn't hold on anymore. He revealed a smile, and the wrinkles on his face were like blooming flowers. They had never been so wonderful. Chapter 376. Creak. The door of the ancestral hall was opened, and Yang Chong-gue walked in slowly. You have a good daughter. Yang Chong-gue pretended not to see the clothes on Yang Yi's body. He snorted and said, Get up. Yang Yi slowly got up from the ground. After kneeling for an hour, his knees were a little sore. With a thought, a warm current gushed out from his dantian and hit the blood vessels there. The soreness immediately dissipated. Daughter? Yang Yi was a little confused. Did Shi do something? Yang Chong-gue ignored him and took care of the altar. After a while he said slowly, Do you know why I asked you to kneel? Yang Yi was silent for a while and said softly, Lack of responsibility. That's one reason. Yang Chong-gue took out a few incense sticks, put them on the kerosene lamp, and lit them. There's another reason. Now that you've made a lot of money, you can't call home as much as when you were in the army. The old man's intuition was very accurate. Although he didn't suspect whether his eldest son's identity had changed, he could sense that Yang Yi maintained an inexplicable distance from home and this place despite his seemingly friendly appearance. How could he not be estranged? This guy was not the real Yang Yi. Yang Chong-gue was more talkative now. You can't forget your ancestors. No matter how much money you make, you can't go against your conscience. You can't forget that you're a descendant of the Yang family. Our Yang family has been loyal for generations. We shed our blood for the country and the people, and we repay our neighbors. We support each other. I want you to kneel in front of your ancestors because I want you to calm down. Whether it's your wife, your children, your parents, your siblings, or your neighbors who have received kindness from you. No matter how much money you earn, you cannot forget your roots. I understand. Looking at his father's back, Yang Yi pondered for a moment before slowly nodding his head. You haven't been back for 2 years. Yang Chong-gue finally turned around and looked at him. He handed over the lit incense and said slowly, Burn some incense for your ancestors. Yang Yi returned and appeared in front of Murphy and Shi. As usual, he had a gentle smile on his face, as if kneeling for almost an hour did not affect him at all. Papa, you're back? She happily threw herself into her father's arms and said happily, I told Grandpa not to lock Papa up. Papa knows his mistakes and changes. He's a good kid, so Grandpa won't be angry anymore. She is very good today. She's very sensible, Murphy said to Yang-yi as she walked over and gently stroked the little girl's hair. Thank you, she. Thank you for your help. Yang-yi kissed his daughter's face, making her giggle. It was late at night. Yang-yi carried Shi and took Murphy upstairs. As soon as they turned on the light and entered the room, Yang-yi could not wait to free one of his hands and gently held Murphy's soft hand. He looked at Murphy's sparkling eyes softly and said, "You've been wrong tonight. In fact, it's my fault." Yang-yi knew that Murphy must have done something behind his back. Otherwise, she would not have run to her father. "Don't say it again." Murphy reached out to cover Yang-yi's mouth and said, "It's my fault. Are you done?" She looked at her mother's posture and her eyes lit up. It seemed that she had unlocked a new movement. "No, I want to say that I didn't think it through before. My father scolded me, and he was right." Yang-yi pulled her hand down and said seriously, "Now, I want to tell you that I want to marry you." Murphy was stunned. The impact of this sentence on her was no less than that of Yang-yi's confession that day. Although she didn't doubt that Yang-yi would marry her, and their relationship had reached a point where success was inevitable, what woman didn't look forward to hearing this sentence from the person she loved? But, at this time, "I'm serious. Although it's a bit rushed, I understand that I can no longer stay out of this matter. I have to be responsible for you. So, I want to tell you that I want to marry you. This is not a proposal. In the future, I will give you a proposal ceremony, a romantic proposal ceremony. Now, I just want to tell you my promise." Yang-yi looked into Murphy's eyes and said firmly. However, Yang-yi, this honest boy, still did not understand. If this is not a proposal, what else can it be? He has already made his statement so clear, but Murphy still has to respond. Wasn't this a proposal? Yang-yi knew that it was rushed, but it was not just rushed. No one had ever proposed in such a clumsy and simple way. Just a moment ago, he was being punished to kneel in the ancestral hall. Now, he came up and said such words. In this simple room, there were no roses, no diamond ring, and he was hugging Shi. Indeed, Shi was as beautiful as a flower, but she was not a flower after all. Cici blinked. She didn't quite understand. She tilted her little head and looked at her father and mother for a while. However, although she was still being hugged by her father and mother did not care about her. In their eyes, there was only each other. She was pitifully ignored. Murphy was also a little confused. Happiness and panic mixed together, and she felt that her IQ was not enough. She was not mentally prepared at all. She would not have thought that Yang-yi would suddenly say this. She was a little flustered and said, "I know, I am very happy. I did not care about the ceremony. Actually, it was impossible not to care." Which woman had not fantasized about it when she was young? It was a romantic occasion like a garden in full bloom. Her lover dressed up like a handsome prince, then got down on one knee and proposed to her. But now, there was nothing, not even a kneel, and Yang-yi said so domineeringly, "I want to marry you." Murphy was so flustered that she forgot her beautiful fantasies, and her mind went blank. There will definitely be a ceremony. I will make it up to you when I propose." Yang-yi did not feel that he was proposing and said seriously to Murphy. No matter what other people thought, Yang-yi had to accept this. In the future, he would give Mo Fei what he thought was romantic. However, Murphy did not know what to do and could only nod shyly. One did not play by the rules, the other did not have a brain. Both of them were the best, and they just happened to be a couple. The two of them stood there for a while, looking at each other with surging emotions in their eyes. They did not know what to say, but that was not important. "Papa, I want to take a bath. I have not taken a bath for 2 days, and I am going to become smelly." Shi, who was ignored, finally could not bear it. She pouted her small mouth and cried out, "Oh, yes. I will give you a bath." Yang-yi quickly put Shi down and said, "Take the clothes, the water is boiling downstairs, and you can take a bath in the bathroom downstairs." Yang Yi said to Murphy apologetically, "The conditions at home are not good, and there is no water heater, so I can only boil water to take a bath. Sorry for the inconvenience." "No, I am fine." Murphy's eyes still had a little shyness. She was in high spirits. She maintained a strong curiosity about new things. When her father took the clothes for her, she walked around her father and asked, "Papa, what is it like to take a bath in boiling water? Do you want to put she in a big pot, and then burn a big fire?" "That is to cook you." Yang Yi heard this and laughed. "Did you see the chicken soup tonight? If you cook it like that, you will be cooked." "Then don't cook she, I am not delicious." The little girl hurriedly waved her hand. When it was time to sleep, Murphy finally recovered from the dizziness. She stretched out her finger, poked Yang Yi's waist, and muttered, "Actually, you don't have to be so anxious." Yang Yi put down the book in his hand and turned to look at Murphy, whose skin was particularly smooth after taking a bath. "I have explained to Mom that because of my work, we can't disclose our relationship for the time being, but we will do it as soon as possible, so as not to let Mom wait too long." In fact, Murphy had already thought about it. When she terminated the contract with Tian Mei, she would officially disclose her relationship with Yang Yi, and also introduce her and Yang Yi's studio. Mom also expressed her understanding. She said that we have been delayed for 4 or 5 years, so it doesn't matter if we wait a little longer. When we can really make it public, we will go back to the village and hold a grand wedding. Murphy said with some shyness. "Well, but it doesn't matter. I just want to tell you that I have made up my mind." Yang Yi laughed. "No, you scared me. You bad guy, you suddenly proposed to me." Murphy rebuked and hammered Yang Yi's chest. "Who proposes like this? It's not a proposal. I said that I will give you a proposal ceremony in the future." Yang Yi complained. "It's a proposal. You forced me to express my opinion." Murphy said with a pout. "Then you agree?" Yang Yi asked with a smirk. No, I want you to give me a super romantic proposal, or I will be unhappy." Murphy turned her head on the pillow. Fortunately, she was sleeping soundly, otherwise she might have been woken up. There will be. Yang Yi held her in his arms and didn't let her move. Then, he lovingly kissed her forehead and said with a smile full of love, "Umph." Murphy hummed like a piglet. After a while, she leaned on Yang Yi's arms and whispered, But, we can still get the certificate first. Mom secretly told me that the wedding ceremony can be made up later, but we can't be together like this." Yang Yi didn't know that his mother loved this stupid daughter-in-law and was worried that Yang Yi would change his mind, like his father, and change sides. Chapter 377. On the second day after returning home, Yang Yi still followed his own schedule. He woke up early and ran 2 laps around the village. However, it was different from the city. The people in the village woke up very early. During the first lap, the sky was blue and the roosters were crowing. Some people had already started to move around. After running the second lap, many people had already started to draw water from the well. When they saw Yang Yi running past, those who knew him even greeted him. Finally, when he passed by the martial arts practice field, Yang Yi was surprised to see that his old man was training a group of young men in their teens to 20s. Hum, 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 a scene in full swing. Young Chongguei was wearing a short jacket in the middle of winter. He led them in front and taught them move by move. Although he was not monitoring them, those young men who were usually naughty did not slack off. Every punch was very serious. Wasn't the school holidays already? However, Yang Yi soon felt relieved. He remembered that when the old man trained the 3 of them, they also trained in winter and summer. However, Yang Yi ran home and woke Shi up. He took a tree branch and asked her to practice swordsmanship with him. Not long after, Yang Chongguei returned. When the old man saw his precious granddaughter practicing the horse stance and waving the tree branch with a straight face, he immediately jumped up. "You rascal, what are you doing?" Yang Chongguei stared at him with his eyes wide open. He took the horsewhip hanging from the tree beside him and swung it in the air with a loud bang. Yang Yi was shocked and quickly stood in front of his daughter. Without waiting for Yang Yi's reply, Yang Chongguei reprimanded him bitterly. Yang, she is still so young and you're letting her practice martial arts. Isn't this ruining the child? Yang Shi, come here. Grandpa is here. In the future, if your father forces you to practice martial arts again, tell Grandpa to beat him up. She poked her head out from behind her father's butt. She blinked and asked in confusion, Grandpa, I'm 4 years old. The little girl thought that her grandfather was asking about her age. Even 4 years old won't do. How can a girl practice martial arts so early? Boys could only start practicing martial arts after they were 5 years old. Girls would have to wait until they were at least 6 years old. Yang Yi's body hasn't even fully recovered yet, and you're already making her do the horse stance. What if she grows into bow-legged in the future? Yang Chongguei pushed Yang Yi away and carried Shi up with heartache. Yang Huan, who was helping Yang Qing draw water from the well, curled her lips and whispered to Yang Qing, Second brother, I remember that when father taught me martial arts, I was 5 years old, right? Why did you arrest me so early in the morning? Yang Yi responded with a wry smile. He was a taciturn person and spoke even less than Yang Chongguei. He was comparable to Yang Yi in the past. I can only start practicing martial arts at the age of 5? Who set the rules? Yang Yi asked with some doubt. In his previous life, he had been fighting with the Grim Reaper ever since he could remember, constantly learning and killing. The rules set by our ancestors. Yang Chongguei pinched his granddaughter's calf and casually brushed Yang Yi off. He then asked with concern, Does it hurt? Yang Shi. It doesn't hurt. I'm used to it. Grandpa, what's bow-legged? She giggled. It's like this. Yang Chongguei put Shi down and spread his legs, arching them like a crab as he walked wobbly. Hee, Grandpa, you're so funny. The little girl was amused. She also learned from Grandpa and walked with bow-legged like a crab. Yang Shi, yes, that's right. You can't learn martial arts like your father in the future. You have to wait until you're 5 or 7 years old, Yang Chongguei reminded. After playing with Grandpa for a while, Shi skipped to the kitchen and reported to her mother what Grandpa had just done. Yang Chongguei then turned to look at Yang Yi. His scrutinizing gaze made Yang Yi's hair stand. Wasn't it just a mistake to let Shi start practicing martial arts too early? Couldn't she just admit her mistake and change? Yang Yi felt that his grandfather was making a mountain out of a molehill. I saw you running outside the village this morning. Yang Chongguei finally opened his mouth. Yes. Yang Yi froze for a moment and nodded. All these years, your martial arts haven't fallen behind? Yang Chongguei asked. My fists never leave my hands, and my music never leaves my mouth. Yang Chongguei showed a trace of relief. It turned out that he wasn't still hung up on the matter just now. The old man began to take off his cotton-padded jacket, revealing the coarse cloth on his upper body. He slowly said, We haven't sparred for 2 years, right? Come, let me see if you're talking nonsense. Yang Yi was a little hesitant. He hesitated and said, Dad, you're old. What, you still look down on your dad? Yang Chongguei snorted, I taught you this martial arts. Let me tell you, no matter how old your dad is, he's still your dad. I can beat you up without a problem. Yang Yi was silent. Although he couldn't help but complain in his heart, if you weren't my dad, I could beat 10 of you without a problem. But after Yang Chongguei finished speaking, he bent his body into a fist and got into a fighting stance. Don't say, the old man's move really had a little of the natural feeling of a master. The chi sank down and vaguely gave Yang Yi a little pressure. Yang Yi couldn't help but let go of the idea of underestimating him. At this time, he also remembered that his grandfather was indeed very strong. In the past 10 years, as Yang Chongguei's hair turned white and he grew older, every time Yang Yi went home, he didn't dare to use his full strength when sparring with the old man. But even before this, when he really didn't hold back when sparring with the old man, the young and strong Yang Yi couldn't beat Yang Chongguei, who was already more than 50 years old at that time. Moreover, in these 30 years, Yang Yi didn't seem to have seen Yang Chongguei use all his martial arts. How strong was he? Yang Yi started to be curious. Therefore, Yang Yi didn't hesitate anymore. Hua hua, the wind from the fist and the force from the torn clothes made explosive sounds. He also bent his body into a fist and got into a fighting stance that was exactly the same as Yang Chongguei's. Hong Quan. This was the real martial arts that Yang Chongguei taught the three of them. It was a real lethal martial arts. It was still a little different from what he taught the kids in the training field. Yang Qing and Yang Huan, who were fetching water, couldn't help but stop what they were doing. Brother, who do you think is stronger between Big Brother and Dad? Yang Huan couldn't help but ask. Dad is stronger, right? Yang Qing hesitated and said with a bitter smile, I can't even beat him now. But Big Brother isn't bad either. I heard from a soldier that Big Brother is very strong. Tens of thousands of people in the army aren't as strong as Big Brother, Yang Huan whispered. Of course, this soldier was Gua Debao, who tied her up back then. Yang Qing didn't say anything. He felt that he didn't have enough information and didn't know how to judge. However, in the yard, Yang Yi and Yang Chongguei had already started fighting. Yang Yi, who had underestimated Yang Chongguei before, immediately suffered. Da-da-bang. With just a few simple moves, Yang Chongguei blocked Yang Yi's fists. Seizing the moment when Yang Yi was exposed, Yang Chongguei punched Yang Yi's chest. Yang Yi took 2 steps back. He touched his arm and looked at the old man in surprise. The last punch on his chest was deflected by Yang Chongguei, so it didn't hurt or itch. However, Yang Yi could clearly feel the strength of the old man's fists when he blocked the other 2 punches. It was very heavy and much stronger than Gua Debao. Yang Yi's arm was a little numb. This was not the most important thing. What surprised Yang Yi was that the old man broke through his defense so quickly. Every punch was just right, as if the old man had guessed his moves, which made him feel very uncomfortable. Although they were both using Hong Quan, Yang Chongguei was really like a grandmaster boxer. The truth was simple, and no move was better than a move. He couldn't lose to Yang Chongguei, who was almost 70 years old. It was one thing to pretend to lose to him, but if he really lost without any resistance, Yang Yi would be so embarrassed that he would find a hole to hide in. Chapter 378. The more serious he was, the more frightened Yang Yi was. Even though Yang Yi had used all his strength, he could not shake Yang Chongguei at all. Yang Chongguei was like an old tree with roots and was as steady as Mount Tai. Even though Yang Yi was no longer playing around and was as agile as a dragon swimming in the water and as agile as a butterfly, the old man's natural punches were able to block all of Yang Yi's attacks. On the other hand, the old man's casual and sudden attacks were always so unexpected. Moreover, they hit when Yang Yi's attacks were at their fiercest, causing him to hurriedly withdraw his moves and be exhausted from parrying. It was very uncomfortable. After a few rounds, the old man with white hair was still breathing steadily. He was as steady as a mountain, like a grandmaster. Was this the same old man who was always so rustic? Previously, Yang Yi did not think much of the memory of his predecessor. He felt that it was not the old man who was too strong, but his predecessor who was too weak. But now, it seemed that Yang Chongguei's kung fu was indeed unfathomable. While he was surprised by Yang Chongguei's kung fu, Yang Qing and Yang Huan's jaws dropped to the ground. Yang Qing had no idea that Yang Yi was so strong, and so was Yang Huan. These 2 guys were not as obsessed with martial arts as Yang Yi, so even Yang Qing was not as good as the old Yang Yi. But he knew that his father's kung fu was very strong. It was just that he did not expect that his elder brother could be so close to the old man. It seemed that his kung fu had improved a lot over the years. Yang Huan was also shocked by his father's vigor. His father was almost 70 years old, but he was still so strong? It was not scientific. The commotion caused by the fight in the courtyard attracted the attention of the 3 people in the kitchen. Cece skipped and ran in front, but when she looked up, she saw her grandfather and father tangled together. Ah, Papa and Grandpa are fighting. The little girl was a little anxious. She turned around and pulled her mom's hand. She pursed her lips and said sadly, Mom, Papa and Grandpa are fighting. Quickly tell them not to fight. Dong Yue, on the other hand, was very calm. She walked up and patted the flower on her hands as she smiled and said to Shi, Little young Shi, don't worry. They're not fighting. They're just playing around and practicing martial arts. She blinked her big eyes and asked doubtfully, Is it the same as Papa and those uncles? Papa and Uncle Shen also fought, but it wasn't a fight. Dong Yue didn't quite understand what the little fellow was talking about. She could only nod with a smile. At this moment, the situation on the battlefield changed. Having met his match, Yang Yi, the martial arts maniac, was also excited. In order to find out his father's true strength, he decided to use his secret weapon, internal energy. Qi sank into his dantian, and several warm currents flowed into his limbs and bones. Yang Yi's strength suddenly increased. With a shake of his forearm, he shook off Yang Chonggui's hand and then punched out. Yang Chonggui parried in time. His arms blocked Yang Yi's powerful punch, but he was forced to take 2 steps back. Stop! Yang Chonggui shouted and jumped out of the circle. The old man was slightly panting, but he also stared at Yang Yi with his eyes wide open. His brows gradually wrinkled. Yang Yi withdrew his hand and gradually calmed down. After calming down, he began to break out in a cold sweat. He was extremely embarrassed. Really, how old had he been? Why was he still competing with an old man who was almost 70 years old? Did he have to use his internal energy to win this fight? If word got out, wouldn't he be laughed to death by his brothers? However, Yang Chonggui didn't stare because he couldn't withstand Yang Yi's attack. He stepped forward, grabbed Yang Yi's right hand, and put 2 fingers on Yang Yi's pulse. Yang Yi was confused at first, but soon felt a subtle warm current flowing into his meridians. However, it was an external force after all. The warm current in Yang Yi's body almost subconsciously moved immediately, sweeping away the foreign object and forcibly driving it out. Yang Yi's fingers were shaken off, but he had already gotten the information he wanted. The old man stared at Yang Yi with his eyes wide open. Where did you learn this? It turned out that when Yang Yi's strength suddenly increased, the old man noticed something was wrong. However, at this moment, Yang Yi also opened his eyes wide and looked at his father in disbelief. How could it be? How could the old man know internal energy? In his memory, his father was just an ordinary martial artist who practiced martial arts. What his father taught the 3 of them was only the Hong Fist. For 30 years, Yang Yi had never seen Yang Chonggui use his internal energy, not even once. He didn't even mention it. However, this also solved Yang Yi's doubts. Previously, he couldn't understand why his father was so strong at such an old age. It turned out that there was an increase in internal energy. Of course, Yang Yi also knew that even in his previous life, people who knew how to use internal energy were extremely rare. This was not something that could be learned just because one wanted to. One needed to be extremely talented and had to have an inheritance. Generally, it wasn't passed to outsiders. Yang Yi also coincidentally obtained the legacy of an old man. There probably weren't many experts in this world, and they were either hidden in the marketplace or living high up in the imperial court as bodyguards. Otherwise, the experts in the army that Yang Yi saw wouldn't just be at the level of Shen Xinyu. Now, the old man actually showed him such a skill. The people around him were actually experts hidden in the marketplace? Yang Yi was dumbfounded. Yang Chonggui looked around and pulled Yang Yi to the back of the ancestral hall to talk. In the yard, she was confused. She couldn't help but pull her grandmother's hand and asked, Grandma, are Papa and Grandpa not fighting anymore? Well, I don't know what they are whispering about. Just ignore them. Dong Yue said with a smile, Come, Grandma will take you to see them. Sure. Cece's interest was piqued. Dong Yue grabbed a handful of grains and came to the courtyard. She pecked a few times, and immediately, chickens flew and ducks jumped in the courtyard. The chickens and ducks that were strolling around flapped their wings and ran over. Wow! Grandma is so awesome! Shi's eyes were wide open. On this side, Yang Chongguei was still questioning Yang Yi with a serious face. Yang Yi had to make up a reason. It's like this. A few years ago, I just retired from the army. At that time, I was working in a restaurant and met an old beggar with a white beard. This reason was used in the novels in his previous life. But thanks to these tricks, Yang Yi made up a very detailed story and convinced Yang Chongguei. Yang Chongguei stroked his beard and said solemnly, "In that case, you also learned this skill by chance." Yang Yi nodded and couldn't help but ask, "Dad, how do you know internal strength? Why have I never seen you use it before? And, why don't you teach us? I'm your son." Yang Chongguei sighed, shook his head and said, "I can't teach you. I used to promise my master that I would take this skill to my grave and never pass it on. Because this is their family's secret." Although during those years of war, there was no news of their family and they must have met with misfortune. But a man can't go back on his word. A man must do what he says. I have kept this secret for decades. Yang Chongguei sighed. Otherwise, why would he be so serious just now? He thought that Yang Yi had secretly learned it from him. Yang Yi didn't have the intention to learn it. He smiled and said, "That's okay. Anyway, I also know a set of internal strength, and it may not be worse than yours, Dad." "Humph, you want to compare yourself with your dad? If it was a few decades ago, I could have pressed you down with a finger. Back then, Yang Chongguei's words stopped abruptly. Yang Yi didn't ignore it and frowned slightly. He suddenly felt that his father was indeed a little mysterious. Recalling those memories, he seemed to have never told him, Yang Qing, and Yang Huan about his past. "Dad, what did you go through back then?" Yang Yi couldn't help but ask. "It's been so many years. Can't you tell me?" Yang Chongguei stared at Yang Yi for a long time. After a long time he said slowly, "Do you really want to know?" Chapter 379. This question was obviously asked while knowing the answer. Yang Yi was already bursting with curiosity. Yang Chongguei sighed after seeing Yang Yi's nod. "I originally wanted to tell you about these things when I was about to die or even bring them into the coffin. But now, you have grown up and have your own children. Sooner or later, you will become the clan master of the Yang clan, so you should know a few things. Could it be a secret story? Come with me." Yang Chongguei opened the door of the ancestral hall and brought Yang Yi in before closing the door. "I once told you 3 siblings that our Yang family has been loyal for generations." Yang Chongguei stood in front of the altar and cupped his hands. He looked up at the tablet on the altar and said slowly, "Do you still remember?" How could he just remember? He used to talk about it often. When Yang Yi came back, he had said it so many times that his ears were getting calluses. "Dad, aren't you just making up stories to fool us?" Yang Yi couldn't help but ask the question that his predecessor, Yang Qing, and Yang Huan had been harboring. If what Yang Chongguei said was true, the Yang family had so many great generals in the previous dynasty. Why were they so miserable in the old master's generation? Moreover, looking at these memorial tablets, although they had been smoking for a few years, Yang Yi found them in his memory. 20 years ago, these memorial tablets were still very new. They were obviously made by Yang Chongguei. Besides, no matter how good Yang Chongguei was, Yang Yi didn't think that he had participated in the previous wars. The timing didn't match. The old master should have been born in the flames of war. When he had just grown up and had some ability, the war had already ended. Where did the enemy come from for him to kill? However, Yang Yi's questioning made Yang Chongguei very unhappy. He fumed and glared at him. "Made it up? How can I make up stories about my ancestors? If I made it up, how can I face my ancestors in the afterlife?" That was true. No one would like to make up a father or a grandfather for themselves. Yang Yi closed his mouth and listened to Yang Chongguei's story. The Yang clan was indeed the descendant of a general. It could even be said that the entire Yang clan was a famous military clan in the previous dynasty. It was stationed in the Min province and the Jiangnan area. Under the emperor's orders, it recruited and trained soldiers to resist the Japanese invaders from the sea. What Yang Yi said was right. Almost every generation of Yang family head had sacrificed themselves on the battlefield to protect their country. The Yang family army was just like the Qi family army in Yang Yi's previous life. They were famous in history, and the Japanese invaders were even more fearful of them. Moreover, compared to Qi Jiguang, the Yang clan's legacy was even longer. Until the end of the previous dynasty, the Yang clan had a history of over 200 years. Speaking of that history, Yang Chonggui's face was full of glory. He even proudly said, "If you go to Jiangnan or Min province, you can still see the statues of our ancestors and the ruins of the ancestral hall." But after that, Yang Chonggui stopped smiling. Later on, the country fell into enemy hands. All sorts of Russians, Japanese, and red-haired wanted a piece of the pie. With the country in danger, your great-grandfather, who is also my grandfather, brought his relatives and former subordinates to join the Southern Army and continued to fight against the Japanese. At that time, the Chinese army was still stuck in the consciousness of the past. They fought valiantly and fearlessly. They didn't understand that they would just raise their swords and charge forward. However, the Japanese army had already entered the era of firearms. The Yang family army couldn't adapt and suffered heavy casualties. After a few big battles, there weren't many people left. Yang Yi's great-grandfather was very skilled, but he couldn't withstand a bullet. In the later stages of the war, Yang Chonggui's father, who was also Yang Yi's grandfather, finally used a gun. He and the remaining men of the Yang family once again entered the extremely tragic all-out war to reclaim the country. The rise and fall of the country is the responsibility of every man. Yang Chonggui said solemnly. Yang Yi didn't know why, but he also had tears in his eyes. It wasn't something he could control. It was a surge of true emotion that came from the depths of his bones. Yang Yi's grandfather became a small general. Of course, it was far from the status of the Yang family army back then. However, in local wars, the guerrilla force led by Yang Yi's grandfather was like Li Yunlong's independent regiment. They appeared and disappeared unpredictably, beating the Japanese until they cried for their parents. When it comes to fighting the Japanese, no one has as much experience as our Yang family. These 200 years of fighting the Japanese weren't for nothing. Yang Chonggui said proudly. However, war was unpredictable. No one knew what changes would happen. It was very similar to what was written in Yang Yi's novel. His grandfather's army was attacked by the Japanese's elite forces. In order to get rid of Grandfather Yang, the Japanese in the central China battlefield sent out a special force. Grandfather Yang wasn't as lucky as Li Yunlong. His entire army was wiped out. Although he sacrificed himself generously, his corpse was found by the Japanese and hung on the city wall to deter the other Chinese troops. The Japanese didn't know that this had instead aroused the bloodlust of the Chinese troops. 2 months later, the Japanese at this station were besieged and annihilated. Speaking of this, Yang Chonggui gave Yang Yi a meaningful look. He had watched some of Drawing Sword. If it weren't for the fact that Grandfather Yang was ambushed during a field battle and that the details were different, he would have suspected that Yang Yi knew something about it. Yang Yi also knew the direction of the war later. 3 years later, all the Japanese in mainland China were driven out. In the end, the Japanese surrendered unconditionally. After 100 years of humiliation, it finally came to an end. But, Dad, where were you in the whole story? Yang Yi could not help but ask. I was still young at that time. Yang Chonggui glared at Yang Yi. And my mother wouldn't let me go to the battlefield to avenge my father. She said that she wanted to leave an heir for the Yang family. Otherwise, how could I sit back and do nothing? Next was Yang Chonggui's story. Yang Chonggui was not able to go to the battlefield to kill the enemy, so he had to hold his breath and practice martial arts. He also met his benefactor in the crowd of people fleeing the war and learned internal strength. However, when he saw the list of Japanese war criminals who were not punished in the newspaper, there was a colonel in the special forces who killed his father. He later became a lieutenant general of a division commander. That guy didn't die? Yang Chongguo was furious. At that time, Yang Yi's grandmother had passed away. The last person who was in charge of Yang Chongguo had left. Yang Chongguo was like a wild horse that no one could stop. I borrowed Treasure Island and learned the Japanese language there for 2 years. After that, I stayed in the Japanese's hometown for a full 15 years. Yang Chongguo proudly said, "In the past 15 years, I've killed every single one of the people on the list. I even set fire to that whatever club it was, and burned it down." "You were the one who did that." Yang Yi took a deep breath. When he was rewriting Drawing Sword, he had checked a lot of history and even a lot of unofficial secrets. He knew that something big happened to the Japanese after the war. Unlike his previous life, where the war criminals could still get away with it, the war criminals in this world died one by one. But that villain. That hero's name was Yang Jie, right? Yang Yi could not help but ask. Yang Jie. Mother***, they can't even write my name wrong. Yang Chongguo snorted and said, "Your father used to be called Yang Jie, but after I returned to China, I changed my name. That name has been registered in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, so how can I still use it?" It really was him. Yang Yi felt a little dizzy. He thought that he was quite awesome in his previous life, but he did not expect the old man to be even more awesome than he was. In 15 years, he turned the Japanese upside down with assassinations and even set fire to their place. Yang Yi wanted to kneel down before the old man when he saw that. It was too awesome. Yang Yi could not think of any words to describe the old man's impressive achievements. Yang Yi originally wondered if Yang Chongguo, who always boasted that his ancestor was a great general who protected the country, was also a soldier in the past. Now, it seemed that he guessed wrong. The old man was similar to him in that they were both in the same line of work. It was no wonder that he was unwilling to deal with the government for so many years. However, in his previous life, he was doing it for money, while the old man was doing it for revenge and for the country. He could not help but respect the old man's past. After causing such a big incident, Yang Chongguo was naturally hunted down by the angry Japanese. However, he did not know what happened and escaped back to China. He could not be careless even when he returned to China. After all, agents were everywhere. The old man changed his name, but he did not change his ancestor's surname. He hid in the valley in Wudayaku village, which was rarely visited by outsiders. "You married my mother and gave birth to me. Why did you want to leave? Didn't you say that you had something important to do?" Yang Yi asked in confusion. He was still brooding over the fact that his mother had given him the name Yang Tixin. What kind of lousy name was that? In his previous life, it was a little green. "I wanted to bring you and your mother back to acknowledge your ancestors. But our young family is the only one left. If we want to rebuild our family and return to our old home, we can only ask our neighbors and elders to help preside over it. If we want to do it, we have to do it in a grand manner. Our young family is a famous family in 2 provinces and 3 cities. We have to make preparations beforehand. Isn't this a big deal?" Yang Chongguo snorted. Yang Yi was speechless. He thought that he had some enemies left behind. "Then why didn't you go back?" Yang Yi asked. "After that, I secretly went back to my old house. There was no one in the old house of the Yang family anymore. However, there were a few outsiders who were sneakily watching from outside. Needless to say, they were definitely waiting for Yang Chongguo, the Demon King, to return. However, he did not know whether they were enemies or friends. Perhaps the former was more likely. For the sake of his family's safety, Yang Chongguo decided not to leave. He stayed obediently and peacefully became a farmer in Wudayaku village. And this secret had been guarded for more than 30 years. So, you must never tell anyone about this matter. Even if it rots in your stomach, you must keep it to yourself," Yang Chongguo warned sternly. Yang Yi nodded silently. No wonder the old man did not tell the 3 of them. He was worried that the little brat's mental state was not complete and would flaunt it to others and bring disaster to the family. The old man had caused too much trouble in the Japanese's territory. Yang Yi did not know if there would still be people who would not let it go after so many years. Yang Yi was also very cautious. Especially now that he had Shi and Murphy, these two people whom he wanted to protect for the rest of his life. Let this matter remain in the ancestral hall. Chapter 380. Other than Yang Chongguei, he was the only one in the Yang family who knew these secrets. Yang Yi didn't show any signs of abnormality. His life in his hometown was still the same. He and Yang Chongguei were still living the lives of ordinary people. However, there was still a slight change. In the next few days before the Spring Festival, Yang Yi and Yang Qing drove to the county town a few times. The house was built not long ago, and it was too simple inside. Since the two brothers were there and it was convenient to have a car, they went to the county town to buy some furniture and appliances to decorate the house. Needless to say, the TV, fridge, air conditioner and so on, Yang Yi even got someone to set up a telephone line in the house. There was basically no signal in this place. Usually, they had to go to the house next door to make a call. It was very inconvenient. In addition to the basic appliances and furniture, Yang Yi also bought an electric pump and a large solar water heater. The electric pump was placed in the well. When it was turned on, the water could be directly pumped up, saving manpower. The water could also be pumped up to the solar water heater on the roof. With these, it would be much more convenient to use water at home. Moreover, she wouldn't have to cook herself in a pot. This big movement naturally attracted the attention of many villagers in Wadayaku village. Every day, there would be people looking for excuses to see the new appliances in the Yang family's house. In private, there were many envious gazes and discussions. Guei, you don't have any farming skills, but you have two good sons with you. You went from being poor to being out of poverty a few years ago, and now you are the richest person in our village. The village chief, Dong Qi, also came. Seeing the changes in the Yang family, he sighed meaningfully to Yang Chongguei. Dong Qi was Dong Yu-er's clansman. His seniority was the same as Dong Yu-er's, but his age was similar to Yang Chongguei's. However, this time, he didn't come to reminisce. To get rich, one must first build roads. This saying was true. Although there was a road in town that led to Wadayaku village, it was built a few years ago. It could take tractors, but it couldn't take trucks. It would affect the sales of the village's crops and mountain products. The village had long planned to build a road, but the villagers had raised funds, but it was not enough to build a road that could carry large trucks. Dong Qi came over because of this matter. He wanted to ask Yang Yi for alms. Dong Qi beat around the bush for a long time before he finally got to the point. However, while he found it difficult to talk about it, Yang Yi was willing to donate generously. After the conversation with his father that night, Yang Yi already had plans to help the village. After some discussion, Yang Yi offered 3 million yuan. Together with the money raised by the village and the subsidies from the state, it was enough to expand and strengthen the foundation of the original road and build a new road. There should still be a lot of money left. Yang Yi suggested to Dong Qi that the rest of the money be used to fix the mud roads in front of every house in the village. They would do their best to pave the roads with cement. In the future, when Yang Yi drove back, he didn't have to be careful. He drove like a tortoise because he was afraid that the car would be bumped into a ditch. Of course, this money had to be supervised. Since Yang Chongguei had nothing to do and was full of righteousness, he naturally had to shoulder this responsibility. These miscellaneous matters didn't need to be discussed. After donating the money, Yang Yi received the support of many villagers. Most of the villagers were simple and honest. Although the Yang Yi was ahead of them and made some jealous, Yang Yi didn't forget his fellow villagers. They all remembered this kindness in their hearts. After the news spread, the Yang family's house was crowded again. However, this time, they didn't come to look at the Yang family's house and big appliances. The simple and honest villagers gave Yang Yi a lot of mountain products and some game they hunted in the mountains. These things weren't worth much because they couldn't be sold. However, the thought behind the gift was more important. They sent them to Yang Yi's wife and daughter to try. This could be considered as repaying Yang Yi's kindness. 2 days before the spring festival, Yang Qing's girlfriend came to visit. Yang Qing's girlfriend was called Zheng Shui. She was from Zheng village in the same town. Zheng village's geographical location was much better than Wudayaku village. Not only was it close to the town, but it was also close to the county. Therefore, Zheng village was obviously much richer. Because the roads were smooth, most of the people in Zheng village lived in buildings. The wealthiest families even drove cars. Logically speaking, such a rich village wouldn't marry their daughter to Wudayaku village. However, the Yang family suddenly became rich and could afford to hire a good matchmaker. She exaggerated the relationship between Yang Qing and the Yang family to the skies. Zheng Shui's mother was willing to let the two young people meet and try. Originally, it was just a test. Zheng Shui's mother didn't think of marrying her daughter to such a remote Wudayaku village. However, who knew that Yang Qing was simple and honest and Zheng Shui was gentle and virtuous. When the two met, they liked each other very well. Zheng Shui's parents were quite satisfied with Yang Qing, who was diligent in his work and didn't have a glib tongue. They had once wanted Yang Qing to come to the Zheng family village and become a live-in son-in-law. Of course, this was impossible. Fortunately, the Yang family's wealth gradually increased with Yang Yi's help. They could afford the betrothal gifts that the Zheng family wanted. In addition, the parents of both parties met a few times and dispelled the Zheng family's doubts and worries about the Yang family. Only then did Zheng Shui's parents agree to marry their daughter. Of course, Yang Qing and Zheng Shui got along very well. After confirming that Zheng Shui was going to visit, he even took the initiative to ask his brother to drive him to pick up Zheng Shui. Zheng Shui wasn't a beauty. Her appearance was clear. She was neither tall nor short, neither fat nor thin. She was still a good-looking girl. She had a high school education. She was better than Yang Qing and Yang Yi. She was well-educated and not delicate. According to Yang Qing, she usually helped out at home. After coming to visit, she even rushed to help in the kitchen. Murphy, who had just learned how to pick vegetables, also lost her job. Hearing that Uncle Qing Zi's aunt was coming, she was curious. She just came back from a stroll with her grandfather. She pulled her father's hand and couldn't wait to go to the kitchen to see the real person. Is she Uncle Qing Zi's aunt? When the little girl saw an unfamiliar woman, she became a little shy. She went behind her father and pulled on his clothes as she asked softly, "Yes, but you have to call her aunt directly. You can't call her Uncle Qing Zi's aunt. It has two different meanings." Yang Yi smiled as he corrected her. Zheng Shui also saw she and even waved her hand to greet her. But when she heard the conversation between Yang Yi and she was a little shy. After all, they weren't married yet. "Why are you all here?" Yang Qing was worried and came over to take a look. Being a taciturn person, he couldn't help but say to Yang Yi and Yang Huan, who was snickering at the side, all right, just take a look. Don't scare Shui." Yang Qing's boyfriend power was at its peak and he began to chase them away. Yang Yi could only hold his daughter's hand and walk out. However, Cece's innocent voice was still heard. The little girl was now familiar with Yang Qing. She couldn't wait to express her opinion to Yang Qing. "Uncle Qing Zi, Aunt Qing is also super beautiful." Yang Qing didn't know what to say. He scratched his head and smiled innocently. "Really?" "Yes. I like Aunt Qing's hair. Papa, can you braid the same hair for me?" The little girl's thoughts were jumping, but her words still made Zheng Shui happy. She couldn't help but touch the braids she braided for brother Qing Zi for a long time today. "Sister-in-law, your daughter's mouth is so sweet," Zheng Shui said to Murphy enviously. "If only I could have such a lovely daughter like you." "Yes, after you and Qing Zi get married, you will have your own baby soon. It must be very cute." Mo Fei and Zheng Shui, who were also unmarried, had already started chatting with each other. In fact, she was more envious of Zheng Shui, because Zheng Shui and Yang Qing's marriage had already been set in May of this year. And it seemed that she didn't know when her wedding with Yang Yi would take place. Although she had made an appointment with Yang Yi that they would get the marriage certificate when they returned to Jiang City during the Spring Festival, it was indeed just a certificate. For a woman, the most important thing was the wedding. While they were chatting, Dong Yue, who didn't let the man cook and cooked by herself, frowned. Chapter 381. In fact, Zheng Shui was just expressing her feelings when she saw Shi. She didn't really want to have a daughter. However, Dong Yue frowned when she heard these words. The speaker has no intention, but the listener has a heart. Fortunately, Dong Yue wasn't an ordinary mother-in-law. She could control Yang Chongguei. Moreover, she had lived with Yang Chongguei for decades. She wasn't as stubborn as the other mothers-in-law in the village. She pondered for a while and said to Zheng Shui with a smile, "Shui, actually, it's not only the daughter who is so cute. The son is not bad too. Look at Tai Zi and Qing Zi. They were so smart when they were young. Now, they are sensible and filial." After all, Zheng Shui grew up in a similar environment. She immediately understood what Dong Yue meant. She hurriedly said, "Aunt Dong, I understand. We want to have a son. It's not that we have to have a son. A few months ago, the county sent people to spread the news that it's the same whether it's a son or a daughter. I'm not that unreasonable." Dong Yue looked at Zheng Shui and smiled. "However," she said, "if we really have a daughter, we'll be happy too. Look at your Uncle Yang. Isn't he always around little Yang Shi? It's just that there's only one branch left in the Yang family. Your Uncle Yang also hopes to have more men. It's more popular." Dong Yue looked at Murphy again. "Murphy, I'm not rushing you. It's just that you and Tai Zi haven't prepared to have another child after having your first one for so long." Zheng Shui's arrival made the Yang family more cheerful and lively after dinner. Yang Yi and Murphy didn't talk much. Yang Qing was a taciturn person. He answered every question that was asked. Usually, he didn't have much of a presence. A few days ago, it was Yang Huan and Shi who livened up the atmosphere. After Zheng Shui came, there were more topics to talk about. After she passed the period of restraint, her cheerful personality allowed her to integrate into the big family quickly. She, who was good at talking, also helped Yang Qing to say some things. For example, she took the initiative to pour tea for Yang Yi. "Brother Tai Zi, thank you for your support. Qing Zi told me that if you didn't help to pay for the betrothal gift, Qing Zi and I wouldn't know what to do." Yang Yi smiled and took the tea. He looked at Zheng Shui and Qing holding hands and said, "You don't have to thank me. You and Qing were fated to be together. Because you hit on each other. That's why you can be together. Even if I don't have the money, Qing will try his best to earn money to marry you. I'm just doing what an elder brother can do. I want him to suffer less so that your relationship won't be so bumpy. Don't you think I'm right?" Yang Qing and Zheng Shui fiercely nodded. Zheng Shui gratefully said, "Even so, I still have to thank you." As night fell, Zheng Shui was sent back home. Yang Yi drove Yang Qing back. After he got out of the car, he patted Yang Qing's shoulder and said with a smile, "Find some time to go to town, learn how to drive, and get your license. When you get married, I'll give you a car as a gift." "Really?" No, it's too expensive." "Brother, you've already paid for the betrothal gift. How can I accept such an expensive gift?" After all, Yang Qing was also a man. He had a natural love for cars. But soon, he refused. "I didn't buy you a car just for you." Yang Yi knew Yang Qing's character. He had already prepared an excuse. "I bought it for you to show filial piety to your parents. Sometimes, you can drive them wherever they want to go. Besides, if Shui wants to go back to her parents' house, she doesn't have a car. How can you let her go back by tractor?" Yang Qing couldn't refuse this reason. He could only nod silently. Yang Yi went back upstairs. Shi, who had just finished bathing, was sitting cross-legged on the quilt, watching the TV intently. However, the TV wasn't good. She could only get the TV from Peijun City and a few county stations. There were no cartoons. She couldn't understand the content on the TV. She turned her head and saw that her father had come back. She immediately got up from the bed and stepped on the quilt. She pouted and said, "Papa, I don't want to watch this TV. Can you help me find that TV with De Xiong and Er Xiong?" "There's no De Xiong and Er Xiong here. There are only these few TV channels." Yang Yi smiled bitterly and shook his head. There were a lot of advertisements on the local TV channels. The quality of the TV dramas was poor. Yang Yi and Murphy didn't like to watch them, let alone Shi. But there was no other way. The TV operators hadn't been able to expand their business to Wadayaku village. They could only hope that after the road was repaired, there would be a turnaround. However, after hearing her father's words, Shi felt a little wronged. She pulled her father's clothes and said, "Papa, I want to go home." "Go home? Why?" Yang Yi asked in surprise. "Didn't the little girl have a lot of fun a few days ago?" "It's not fun here. There's no De Xiong and Er Xiong to watch. Then Xiao Guai and the others aren't here. I also miss Xin Er, Chi and the others." She became sadder as she spoke. Yang Yi quickly sat down and hugged her. "How can it not be fun? Didn't you have a lot of fun with Grandpa this morning?" But Grandpa went to sleep at night." Shi's eyes turned red. She pulled her father's clothes and said sadly, "And it was dark outside. It was very scary." "Why is she crying?" Murphy had just come out of the shower. She was drying her hair when she heard Shi's cry. She looked at Yang Yi in confusion. "Mom, I want to go home." The little girl sobbed. "She's too bored at night," Yang Yi said with a wry smile. Murphy sat beside Yang Yi, reached out her hand and touched her daughter's nose. She said softly, "We will go home, but not now. We have to wait until after the spring festival. By the way, didn't you say that you would go with Grandpa to watch the dogs give birth tomorrow? If you go back, how can you watch the dogs give birth?" She was stunned. She didn't seem to think about this problem. Now that she thought about it, she became spirited again. Although her eyes were still red, she pouted and said, Then I don't want to go back first. I want to watch the dogs give birth." After coaxing his daughter, Yang Yi breathed a sigh of relief. He began to rack his brains to tell Shi a story. Finally, her tears turned into laughter. Then she fell asleep peacefully. Tomorrow morning, the little girl would certainly not think of going back, because there were still many unknown places in the village waiting for her to explore. However, Murphy had something on her mind. When she fell asleep, she hugged Yang Yi's arm and told him, "Yang Yi, what do you think if Erwa gives birth to a daughter in the future?" "Give birth to a daughter?" Yang Yi beamed with joy. "That's a good thing. I have another daughter, and then she will also have a sister." "Hey, I didn't mean that. It's because of Mom, she wants a grandson, and so does Dad." Murphy told Yang Yi about what Dong Yue had said to her and Zheng Shui in the morning. She said with some worry, "Actually, I also want a son. One son and one daughter. How happy. But I'm afraid that if I give birth to another daughter, Dad and Mom will be disappointed." "You big fool, if you give birth to another daughter, Dad and Mom won't blame you. Because don't you have my brother and his wife?" Yang Yi said with a smile, "Moreover, you don't even know if it will be a daughter. Maybe it will be a son. Isn't that a happy ending for everyone?" "But what if it must be a daughter?" Murphy asked worriedly. "If it's a daughter, then I tell you, I'll be 1,000,000% happy. Then, Dad and Mom definitely won't be disappointed because of this. Look at Dad, doesn't he dote on Cece so much now? Girls are better, well-behaved and cute." Yang Yi patted his chest and said, "I know you're comforting me." Murphy actually felt a lot more at ease after hearing Yang Yi's words, although she still blamed him. By the way, we can't just talk about it without doing anything. Yang Yi moved closer to Murphy's ear. If you want to have a second baby, you have to practice more, and be good at it. Damn, Shishi is still here. Murphy's face turned red. Next door. Didn't you see that 2 days ago, in addition to the furniture and home appliances, I also bought the bedding? Moreover, I washed it clean and dried it for 2 days. It smells good. Yang Yi laughed. No wonder. Forgive you for your premeditated plan. Murphy bashfully pinched Yang Yi's waist. Her ears were dyed pink. As if he heard the starting gun, Yang Yi turned over and got out of bed with his hairy legs bare. He was not afraid of the cold. He wrapped Murphy, who was wearing warm pajamas, with his coat and carried her up. Murphy was tall and not light, but Yang Yi was strong, so it was easy for him to carry her. Ah! Mo Fei was so scared by his anxious look that she let out a scream. However, seeing Yang Yi rummaging in the luggage next to her, Murphy hooked Yang Yi's neck with one hand and pulled Yang Yi's hand with the other. She blushed and said, "No need." Yang Yi misunderstood. He smiled and said, half comforting and half teasing, "Hee, don't worry, I know it's not easy to buy this large-size condom, so I brought a few boxes back. It's enough." Murphy was so shy that she buried her head in Yang Yi's arms and said in a muffled voice, "Didn't you say it's a practice? How can I practice wearing it?" Yang Yi was overjoyed. Chapter 382. De Pa was the one who told Shi that a dog was about to give birth. Their De Huang had been pregnant for 2 months. Moreover, it had been a little restless these days, running around or circling around its nest. It seemed that it would give birth to a baby in the next 2 days. However, to Shi's disappointment, when she and her grandfather went to visit De Pa the next day, De Huang had not given birth yet. Li Shupo lied about the military intelligence. De Huang would give birth on the first day of the Spring Festival. However, because it was the first day of the Spring Festival, Yang Yi and Yang Chongguei did not tell Shi that it was not appropriate to disturb people who were not relatives today. Although Shi woke up early in the morning and missed the puppy for a while, the lively atmosphere of the Spring Festival diluted her longing. The crackling sound of firecrackers rose and fell in the village. In Wudayaku village, the opening of the door to set off firecrackers was called the Door God. The Yang family also set off firecrackers, and this year, Lunar New Year, the first one was lit by Yang Yi. She was actually a little afraid of firecrackers. A few days ago, when she saw the crackling sound of firecrackers exploding, she would tremble. However, the more afraid she was, the more she wanted to see it. She shrank in her mother's arms early in the morning. While nervous, she stared at it intently. Mo Fei's hands were pulled up by her and covered her ears with them. Seeing her father walking to the long firecrackers with incense, the little girl became anxious. She could not help but cry, "Papa, be careful." Before Yang Yi lit the firecrackers, she shouted in panic, "Papa, run, it's going to explode." She was so nervous that her little face tightened. However, her father was very calm. Yang Yi calmly lit the fuse, then turned his head and slowly walked to Shi. The firecrackers behind him crackled for a while and began to explode one by one. A real man would never look back to see an explosion. The firecrackers behind him lit up one by one and exploded in the air, rolling up thick smoke. The red firecracker paper fluttered like butterflies, circling and falling to the ground. However, his calmness made Shi extremely anxious. She snuggled into her mother's arms and stomped her little feet, wishing that she could help her father run. Hee, is Daddy cool? Yang Yi finally came back, alive. He made a shooting gesture at his daughter, thinking that he looked very cool. However, Shi pouted and said unhappily, "I don't want to talk to you anymore. Papa, you're naughty and disobedient." "Hey, why are you being disobedient?" Yang Yi smiled and reached out to scratch his daughter's little nose. There was still a red mark on his finger, and Shi's nose was also stained with a little red. "I told you to run, or you'll be blown up," Shi complained. "No, I know when it will explode, so I can control the distance. Yang-yi smiled gently. But it's very scary. I don't like it, I don't like it. The little girl shook her little head. She was actually in a good mood that day. What she was happiest about was receiving red packets. Early in the morning, the little girl couldn't wait to go to each person, wishing them good luck, and then looked at them eagerly as they waited for the red packets. She received a big red packet from her father, mother, grandfather, grandmother, and Uncle Ching-zi. She happily put it in her pocket. Her mother said that she could take it first and give it to her mother for safekeeping at night. However, she encountered difficulties with her little aunt. What? You want a red packet from me? I'm not old enough to ask for red packets. Yang Huan pouted and complained to Shi. She didn't understand. She blinked her big eyes innocently and looked at Yang Huan. In her opinion, it was okay to ask for red packets from adults. Yang Huan was defeated by her innocent and hopeful eyes. She reluctantly took out the red packet that she had asked for from Yang-yi in the morning and handed it over. All right, here you go. Hee, little aunt, you're so nice. She smiled. Her mouth was very sweet, as if it was smeared with honey. After receiving the red packet, she carefully opened the pocket of her down jacket and put it in. Then, she carefully buttoned the pocket, as if she was afraid that she would lose it. There are so many red packets. Give me some. Yang Huan glanced at it and said enviously, No. The little girl giggled and ran away with her long legs. The little girl was very busy. She still had to visit relatives with her father, grandfather, and grandmother, and then continue to receive red packets. The next day, Yang Chongguei took Shi to Depo's house to see the puppy. Yang-yi was also interested in the puppy, so he went with them. De Huang was a Chinese rural dog, also known as a native dog. However, the breed of Depo's De Huang was very pure. It had brownish-yellow fur on its back and white fur on its abdomen. The fur was medium long and fine, a bit like a Shiba Inu. However, its mouth was sharper and its limbs were more slender and strong. Big Yellow, who was still taking care of its baby in its nest, raised its head vigilantly and bared its sharp canine teeth. The dog that bites doesn't bark, so Big Yellow didn't make a sound. It had the demeanor of a general. She was so frightened that she hurriedly hid behind her father. Big Yellow, this is a friend. Don't scare him. Depa squatted down and patted Big Yellow's back to comfort him. Big Yellow slowly curbed its ferocious look. It lowered its head and wagged its tail. It has accepted you. Depa smiled and said to Yang-yi and Shi. Just watch from here. The bitch is protecting her pups. Yang Chongguei stopped Shi, who was curious and wanted to get closer to the front. Big Yellow's nest was moved to a warm house because of the delivery of the babies. Although it was a simple nest made of haystacks, Cece's attention was still attracted by the 6 small gray balls of meat lying under Big Yellow's belly. The little girl was a little afraid of the big bitch, so she held her father's hand and didn't let go. However, she couldn't help but be curious and happy. She opened her big eyes and kept looking at the small meatballs. Papa, why aren't they moving? She looked for a while and finally couldn't help but ask. Because they were just born not long ago and are still sleeping sleepily. Yang-yi explained, moreover, they can't see or hear now. They have to wait until they are bigger before they can be active. At this time, one of the small meatballs moved. Papa, look. She cried out in surprise, her face full of joy. The small meatball arched and squeezed into Big Yellow's belly. It looked around, found a place, and began to drink milk. During the whole process, She opened her eyes wide and watched nervously. This small meatball was so cute. It didn't seem to have any defense at all, which made Cece feel pity and love for it. Teacher Yang, Brother Teasy, if this child likes it, why don't we take one home? Depa scratched his head and smiled. Really? She looked at him in surprise. She looked at her father nervously and asked expectantly, Papa, can we take a puppy home? Of course, our big yellow gave birth to 2 litters of puppies, and they were all taken away. If you like it, you can take one home too. It's okay, Depa said generously. However, Yongyi shook his head. Not now. She felt as if she had fallen from the clouds to the ground. She felt wronged and asked, Papa, why not? I like puppies. It's not that Papa doesn't want you to raise a dog, but it's not now. Yongyi explained with a smile, the puppy is still small, and we can't take care of it. It's best to let it stay with its mother for a while, and it's best to take it home after 2 or 3 months. You don't want the puppy to leave its mother, right? But I still like puppies. I like this one. She pouted and pointed at the small meatball that moved just now. Perhaps she felt that this one was more congenial. Then this one is ours. Yongyi said with a smile, but it's still with its mother for now. When we come in May, we'll take it home. At this time, Yongyi turned to Li Shupo and said, Depa, please leave this one for Shi and help take care of it for a few months. When we come back from Qingzi's wedding in May, we'll take it home. No problem. The conversation between her father and the uncle made Shi smile happily again. Puppy, you have to wait for me to come back to pick you up. When they parted, Shi could finally hug the small meatball. She was so happy that she couldn't bear to let go. In the end, she said to the small meatball reluctantly. Although they still had to wait for a few months, they were going to have a puppy. She began to look forward to it. Chapter 383. After staying at home for 2 weeks, Yongyi and his family embarked on their return journey on the 6th day of the Lunar New Year. The car was filled with mountain goods sent by the villagers. Yang Huan had to stay at home until the end of the Lantern Festival and then take the train back. Yongyi and his family returned to Jiang City early because the holidays were over and Murphy had to go back to work. When they left, Shi was fine. She only talked about the puppy and said goodbye to her grandparents reluctantly, but she didn't cry and complain about not wanting to go home. But Yang Chongguei was sad. He was the most reluctant. These days, he was used to his granddaughter's constant chatter. Now that his granddaughter was going back, the old man's heart felt empty. When he woke up early in the morning, he looked at Yongyi with a sullen face. Yongyi couldn't do anything about it. He tried again, Dad, why don't you come to my place and play for a while before coming back? Yongyi had mentioned this to Yang Chongguei and Dong Yue before. He wanted to bring them to the city to enjoy life. However, Yang Chongguei and Dong Yue were not willing. Compared to the city, they preferred the small village where they had lived for decades. Dong Yue had said before, when you and Murphy have a wedding, or when you have a baby, I will go and take a look. As expected, Yang Chongguei didn't agree. Instead, he glared at him, as if he was the one who kidnapped his granddaughter. They returned to Jiang City safely. A new year was about to begin. Although the students hadn't returned to school yet, Du Yuanlei was still there. In order to finish the production of Fairy Tale as soon as possible, she spent the whole spring festival in the editing room provided by the school. The next day, Yang Yi took Cece and brought some local specialties from his hometown to look for her. He also picked up the 3 kittens that he had taken care of. But when he saw Du Yuanlei, Yang Yi was stunned. He almost didn't recognize her. The girl in front of him with her hair tied up casually and her face pale and haggard was so different from the confident and proud goddess director. Little Du, I didn't give you a deadline, did I? I didn't ask you to edit the film in a hurry. Why? Did you torture yourself like this? Yang Yi couldn't help but scold him. Du Yuanlei shook her head, hesitating to speak. Teacher Yang, the film is done. Why don't you come and take a look? Du Yuanlei took out her laptop and placed it on the table. Speaking of this micro-movie, Du Yuanlei's face revealed a trace of a smile, as if it was her painstaking work. Yang Yi nodded and went to the computer to look. The plot was still a familiar plot, but in Du Yuanlei's hands, it had a different flavor. Compared to the music videos in his previous life, the story of this micro-movie was much fuller, and the pace was also very tight, especially in some of the tear-jerking scenes. The combination of moving and still scenes was very expressive. I want to become a fairy tale. The song that Guazi had recorded before the festival was also edited into the micromovie. Of course, compared to the music video, the editing and accompaniment were more reasonable. It did not give the feeling of an extended music video. Good shooting, good editing. Yang Yi praised, "You did a good job in this film. After school reopens, we'll officially release this film on Weibo. We'll also start a Weibo competition. Believe me, more people will see your work." After Yang Yi finished watching, he raised his head and said to Du Yuanlei, who was bringing Shi to see the 3 kittens. Of course, they couldn't be called kittens, because the 6 to 7-month-old British Shorthair was not small. It was just that they were a little silly, and their big yellow and black eyes gave people a feeling of being silly and cute. However, when Shi saw Xiao Guai and the others, she ran over and complained, "Papa, Xiao Guai, and Dondo, they became fat." Became fat? Yang Yi was surprised and went over to take a look with Shi. The 3 grayish-blue little guys were still lying in their warm nest. They lazily raised their eyes to look at the poop picker, and only Dondo meowed as a greeting. They really became fat. Yang Yi touched Dondo. It was fat now, and its fur was smooth. It looked like it had a lot of oil. It was too lazy to move, but its tail gently swayed over and rubbed Yang Yi's arm. Du Yuanlei said with some embarrassment, "I'm sorry, Mr. Yang. I didn't have time to let them go out for a walk, and I was afraid that they would get lost, so I kept them in the dormitory." Du Yuanlei lived in Jiangchuan's postgraduate dormitory. It was a newly built building, and it was very new. It was like an apartment, and there were 2 people in one dormitory. Du Yuanlei's roommate moved out to live with her boyfriend, so she lived alone in one room, which was quite spacious. The 3 little guys didn't seem to exercise much, and they also ate a lot. Next to them were the canned small fish that Du Yuanlei bought for them. He didn't know if they had a good appetite. "Papa, it's not good to be fat. Look at Xiao Guai, she doesn't want to play with me anymore." She said sadly. "Okay, it's okay. When you go back, you can play with them more with the cat teaser, and they will lose weight quickly." They didn't gain much weight. Maybe they don't want to move because it's cold. Yang Yi rubbed his daughter's little head and smiled. The last sentence was said to Du Yuanlei. He packed the 3 little British Shorthair into a cramped cat cage, then took their little nest and prepared to leave with Shi. "Mr. Yang, you can take this with you. They can eat it when we go back." Du Yuanlei caught up and handed the remaining dozen canned small fish to Yang Yi in a bag. She looked at the 3 cats a little reluctantly, then shook her head and said to Yang Yi, "I don't have any cats here anyway, so it's useless to keep them." Yang Yi took it and said to Du Yuanlei with a smile, "You finished making the micromovie, so there's no need to make yourself look like neither a human nor a ghost. Rest well for a few days, relax, or go out and have some fun. When you're ready, I'll show you the new script." "Mr. Yang, you've already written the script?" Du Yuanlei was surprised. From a micromovie to a real movie, the latter was the real leap that Du Yuanlei wanted to make. "Don't get too excited, we'll talk about it when you're ready." Yang Yi waved his hand and smiled. "I can't trust you with the script in your current state." After Yang Yi and his daughter left, Du Yuanlei returned to her room. She walked in front of the dressing mirror, looked at her haggard appearance, and sighed faintly. "Mr. Yang, do you think that I became like this because I didn't sleep well?" Du Yuanlei was talking to herself. Du Yuanlei took out a book from the drawer and took out a photo that was clipped inside. On the photo was a girl with long hair. She was smiling and hugging the neck of a boy in front of her. She was jumping on his back. Chapter 384. Du Yuanlei had been in a relationship during her undergraduate studies. Her boyfriend was her high school classmate. At that time, she was still very innocent. She thought that loving someone was the end of the story. Love at that time was indeed beautiful. When she was in her third year of university, Du Yuanlei was busy with the documentary project and had no time for romance. However, when she looked back, she saw her boyfriend holding hands with another woman and walking into a small hotel. It was really a coincidence, but it was also like a bolt from the blue. It made her lose hope in love. This relationship naturally ended when Du Yuanlei broke up with him. Although her ex-boyfriend cried and begged for her forgiveness, Du Yuanlei was still cold. Only she knew that under her cold expression, her heart was bleeding. In order to forget him, Du Yuanlei even cut her hair. From then on, Du Yuanlei had short hair and no makeup. Later, her ex-boyfriend dated a few girls during his fourth year of university, but none of them lasted. When they graduated, he came to Du Yuanlei drunk and told her that he still loved her. However, Du Yuanlei had already been hurt by him and could not forgive him. Ironically, during the Spring Festival, Du Yuanlei found out from a high school friend that her ex-boyfriend, who had returned to his hometown to become a civil servant, had gotten married during the Spring Festival. In just half a year, he dated another woman and got her pregnant. He got married in a hurry. When Du Yuanlei heard the news, she felt inexplicably sad again. She thought that she had given up on this jerk and had let go of the past. However, when she heard the news of his marriage, Du Yuanlei was still in a daze for a few days. She did not know why her tears fell, and then she lost her appetite. How could she not be haggard after such a torment? Now, Du Yuanlei found the photo again. Looking at her long hair in the photo, it felt like a lifetime had passed. However, Du Yuanlei's eyes suddenly became determined. She took out a pair of scissors and without hesitation, she began to cut the photo into pieces. Piece by piece, they fell like autumn leaves. Yang, thank you for giving me good and bad memories. However, I have to look forward. Du Yuanlei looked at the photo fragments on the table and was stunned for a moment. However, she still swept them into the trash can. Goodbye. Du Yuanlei got up and went to the bathroom to wash her face with cold water. She decided to have a good sleep. Like Yang Yi said, she would go out and have fun for a few days. When she recovered, she would start her new movie as soon as possible. Du Yuanlei walked away. The lamp on the table was still on. Under the book with the photo, there was a thick script. However, it wasn't fairy tale. It was Love Alley, that Du Yuanlei had written before the adaptation. Didn't Guazi and Yang Yi ask Du Yuanlei why she had to write Guang to death? What they did not know was that Guang and the male lead who pursued Su Sheshe were actually two beautiful images of Du Yuanlei's ex-boyfriend, Yang. The male lead was when Yang was pursuing Du Yuanlei, and Guang was the best memory of Yang and Du Yuanlei. Guang died because Du Yuanlei wanted this memory to disappear completely. She did not want him to become the Yang that she hated. As for the male lead, although he was sincere and tried to pursue Su Sheshe, Du Yuanlei knew that this man, who was so good at the courtship stage, would not cherish her after he got her. Therefore, Du Yuanlei would rather Su Sheshe not accept him than let her experience the same thing again. Isn't this brain circuit amazing? This is art. Unfortunately, Du Yuanlei was good at art, but she could not write a good story. It was better for her to focus on being a director. Not to mention Du Yuanlei's self-adjustment, Yang Yi also started to get busy after he returned home. He was preparing for a romantic proposal for Murphy. Of course, Murphy did not know when he planned to propose, but Yang Yi had already put it on the agenda. Both of them had previously discussed that they would wait for Murphy to return from Shanghai after filming Jixin interview in a few days. Since she had not started preparing for the concert arranged by the company, they would go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get their marriage certificate during this short break. Yang Yi planned to propose to Murphy the night before that, which was also the night when Murphy returned from filming. Therefore, before that, Yang Yi had to make all the preparations and think of a romantic proposal for Murphy. However, for the time being, these preparations could only be carried out in his mind. In order not to let Mo Fei notice, in the first few days after he came back, Yang Yi did not buy the necessary materials. He would wait until Mo Fei went to record the show, and then he would take action. On this day, Yang Yi was wiping the bar counter in the coffee shop. The coffee shop on the corner of the street had not been open for 2 weeks. It took Yang Yi a whole day just to clean it up. It was only today that it officially reopened. However, the students had not returned to school yet, so there should not be any customers. Yang Yi wiped the bar and coffee cups as he smiled at his daughter who was playing with the cat beside him. She did not wear as much as she did in her hometown because Zhongqing was slightly warmer than Pei Prefecture. In addition, spring had quietly revealed its beautiful figure, so the thick down jacket could be hung up. Cici was wearing a long-sleeved sweater. The upper part of the sweater was pure pink, while the lower part of the sweater near her belly, including the sleeves at the same level, was black with white dots. There was also an elegant and cute white cat girl with a black bow in the middle, spanning across the 2 color areas. In the coffee shop, a sweater was enough to keep the girl warm without wearing too much. The little girl also looked playful and cute. Xiao Guai, Duo, and Xiao Hui, come with sister. She shook the cat teaser and played with the 3 British Shorthair who had gained a lot of weight. Fortunately, they had only gained a lot of weight. In the warm coffee shop, they were still willing to move around. Under the teasing of the cotton ball on the cat teaser, the 3 British Shorthair jumped up one after another on the ground, then flipped over and landed on the ground. She blinked her big eyes. She wanted Xiao Guai and the others to lose weight, but she felt that this amount of exercise was not enough. Thus, the little girl stepped on her heels, took off her little sneakers, and climbed onto the sofa seat in the booth. Her feet, which were wearing cartoon socks, stepped on the sofa, making squeaking sounds. Hee, Xiao Guai, come up. Xiao Hui, Duo, come up too. Cici felt that it was very fun to step on them. She laughed happily and waved the cat stick at them while waving the cat teaser. The 3 British Shorthair looked at their little master for a while. In the end, Xiao Guai was the most obedient. It jumped up and jumped onto the sofa. After all, from the looks of their bodies, the 3 British Shorthair, which were 6 to 7 months old, had fully developed. They were similar to adult cats, so it was easy for them to jump onto the sofa. Seeing that Xiao Guai, who jumped onto the sofa first, was stroked by their little master, Xiao Hui and Duo also jumped onto the sofa. Oh, wait a minute, I can't stand anymore. She giggled and quickly stepped back. Stand steadily, hold on to the back of the sofa, don't fall. Yang Yi also thought it was interesting, but he was still a little worried and reminded her. At this time, 2 people walked into the coffee shop. Acquaintances. Chapter 385. Of course, Yang Yi knew the 2 who came in from the door. When they left, they specially came to the coffee shop to bid farewell. However, at this moment, after nearly half a year, the 2 of them were very different. Their clothes were still simple, but they weren't as down and out as before. Their trench coats weren't expensive, and they looked much neater. In terms of spirit and appearance, they weren't as complacent and full of vitality as when they left. Instead, their faces had more vicissitudes of life, and they gave off a faint sense of loneliness. But regardless of anything else, Yang Yi was still very happy to see them. He smiled and took the initiative to greet them. Chenli Chuan Shu, Lu Xiaoshu, Miao Chuan. Teske, what a rare guest. Long time no see. It was indeed Lu Xiaoshu and Miao Chuan. The 2 of them shyly smiled at Yang Yi. Lu Xiaoshu also cupped his hands and greeted Yang Yi. The 2 of them were about to pay for the coffee, but Yang Yi waved his hand and smiled. We haven't seen each other for so long, and you're still doing the same old thing. I'll treat you to coffee, and you sing me a song. Yeah, that. I miss her in the winter in the north. Or do you have any new songs? Lu Xiaoshu and Miao Chuan were stunned for a moment. They looked at each other with an awkward expression. What? You don't want to sing? Don't tell me that singing a song now costs more than a cup of coffee? Yang Yi knew that the 2 of them weren't that kind of people. He was just joking and teasing them. No, it's just that we're not allowed to sing in public. Lu Xiaoshu shook his head with a wry smile. Yang Yi knitted his brows and shook his head. There's only a few of us in this shop, and it's still considered a public place? Your management company is really too much. There are too many rules. Forget it, I'll treat you to coffee. Miao Chuan wanted to say something but hesitated. Lu Xiaoshu gritted his teeth and said, "You're right, boss. Anyway, it's not a public place, and there's no one else. What's the big deal about singing a song? But I didn't bring my guitar today, so I'll have to sing for you, boss. Can you play the piano?" Yang Yi liked Lu Xiaoshu's straightforwardness. He pointed to the piano and said, "You can play that one." "I will." Miao Chuan nodded. After he finished speaking, he walked over to the piano. "Theodore grand piano?" Miao Chuan finally reacted and looked at Yang Yi in surprise. He touched it lovingly. The black body of the piano felt as delicate as milk. Next, Miao Chuan played the piano accompaniment and Lu Xiaoshu sang. Miao Chuan would also sing a few lines. The two of them cooperated well and performed the song, "I Miss Her in the Winter in the North," for Yang Yi. Although there was only the last bit of coldness left in the winter, Lu Xiaoshu's voice was still as clear as winter. His and Miao Chuan's vicissitudes and helplessness added a touch of sadness to the song. It was so nice that she couldn't help but stop and look over. She stood on the sofa and leaned her little butt against the backrest, listening quietly. Although she didn't understand the meaning of the lyrics, the melody was very beautiful. It was those two uncles. The little girl also recognized them at this moment. She didn't move, which gave the three British Shorthairs a chance. Little Gray took the opportunity to press down on the cotton ball hanging from the cat teaser and gnawed on it. Little Guai and Dodo didn't want to be outdone and fought with it to play. Little Guai, who had grown up, was no longer as petite and weak as before. It was now about the same size as Little Gray, so it didn't show any weakness when fighting. On the other side, Yang Yi finished listening to their song and began to make coffee for them. As he shook the grinder, he smiled and said, "By the way, shouldn't you be in Xiongnan now? Why did you come back to Zhongqing?" Lu Xiaoshu and Miao Chuan were silent for a while. Seeing that they didn't say anything, Yang Yi continued, "Last time when you came to say goodbye to me, I was quite happy because you finally went on the path you wanted to go. Also, I was thinking that when your single or album comes out, I'll buy it back and put it on the shelf." Yang Yi pointed to the shelves in the shop, which were all excellent music albums from this world. Many of them were difficult to buy in the music stores outside. Fortunately, he had connections. Through the Sahara online shopping mall, he asked them to help him get a batch of out-of-print albums. However, Yang Yi's words made Lu Xiaoshu and Miao Chuan's faces even more gloomy. It wasn't until Yang Yi served the coffee that Lu Xiaoshu made up his mind. He sighed and said to Yang Yi, "Boss, we've been frozen by the company." "Frozen?" Yang Yi's eyes widened and he asked in confusion, "Why? Didn't you say that you'd be a trainee first?" Logically speaking, Chenli Chuanchu's song wasn't bad. Although it hadn't been tested by the market, how could a song that Yang Yi liked be bad? How could a company be so stupid as to freeze a singer after signing him? "This signing is a scam," Miao Chuan couldn't help but say. Lu Xiaoshu asked, "Boss, do you know Rong Huada Management Agency? Or have you heard of a new student called Tang Kai Tai in Zhongchuan this year?" How could Yang Yi not have heard of it? This guy had cheated Du Yuanlei and Guazi before. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had the chance to let Du Yuanlei film Fairy Tale. "He lied to you?" Yang Yi frowned and asked. "Rong Huada belongs to Tang Kai Tai's family. They signed us. At first, they said that they liked the song we sang and were going to ask the teachers to train us. Then, they would arrange for us to release a single," Lu Xiaoshu said. "But it was only a verbal promise. They didn't even write it in the contract." Miao Chuan clenched his fist and said, "Well, we were also stupid. At that time, we thought we were going to debut. We were very happy and signed the contract in a daze." Lu Xiaoshu sighed and said, "Who knew that after a month of training, they would suddenly change their mind?" Rong Huada's manager told them that the company wanted to discuss with them to give the song, "I Miss Her in the Winter in the North," to Tang Kai Tai. Then, as a report, The company would help them to invite songs and use other people's songs to release a record for them. You didn't agree, right? Yang Yi frowned. No, we didn't agree. Lu Xiaoshu shook his head decisively. At that time, they even quarreled with their manager. They were still a little angry because they couldn't tolerate sand in their eyes. How could they agree? Maybe when they just signed the contract, they didn't have the intention to steal their songs. Rong Huada's contract didn't have any relevant clauses. But it wasn't like Rong Huada couldn't do anything to Thousand Miles Chuanshu and Lu Xiaoshu. The training stopped, the dormitory arranged for them to live in also stopped paying rent. They also restricted their right to participate in commercial activities, completely freezing them. The contract is for 7 years. Miao Chuan sighed. The newcomer's contract was actually similar, but Lu Xiaoshu and Miao Chuan stepped into the pit. They weren't willing to compromise, so they had to fight with Rong Huada for 7 years. Previously, we all lived at home. Now, after discussing with the school, although we have to wait until the next school year to resume our studies, the school said that we can live in the dormitory. So, we came back temporarily and thought of another way. Lu Xiaoshu gritted his teeth and said, no matter what, even if we have to endure for 7 years, we won't give our songs to those liars. Miao Chuan also nodded vigorously. The result of their discussion was that they would first come back to study. While studying, they would write songs, and then find a solution. Even if they had to wait for 7 years, they would continue to walk on their own musical path. Then what about your source of income? You can't go to commercial performances. How can you have money to live? Yang Yi asked. Although the company froze us, according to the contract, we are still qualified as trainees. So, we still have a little salary every month. Although it's not much, it's enough to live on. And before we signed the contract, they gave us a sum of money. We didn't spend it. We saved it. Lu Xiaoshu said. Take one step at a time. Miao Chuan held the coffee for a long time without drinking, and said faintly. Yang Yi looked at these two boys whose dreams had been broken. He was silent. He was a little sad and also a little angry. However, now that he had a certain amount of resources and social status, Yang Yi didn't want to stand by and do nothing. He pondered, trying to find a way to help Lu Xiaoshu and Miao Chuan out of this predicament. What to do? Chapter 386. Although Yang Yi had secretly made the decision to help Qianli Chuanshu and Miao Chuan resolve the contract issue, he did not tell Lu Xiaoshu and Miao Chuan because he was not confident. Yang Yi did not use his own methods this time. It was not worth it. If he personally took action, he would have to take a huge risk. Now that Yang Yi had a big family and business, he did not want to put his family's head on his belt. Unless it was something that made him very angry or something that concerned his family, Yang Yi was not willing to take action easily. Moreover, most problems could be solved with money now. Why should he take a detour? However, when Yang Yi consulted Miss Murphy, an experienced person in the entertainment industry, Murphy expressed her indignation. However, she could not give any opinions. After Mo Xiaowan found out about this matter, she gave Yang Yi a suggestion. You can go through legal channels. First, find someone to check if there are any problems with their contract. Or if Rong Huada did something that violated the contract, you can also take the opportunity to sue them and request to terminate the contract. This required a famous lawyer to help with the lawsuit. Mo Xiaowan did not have any suitable candidates, but Yang Yi still received Lanzhao Kai's recommendation. The main reason was that she was a little bored at home and wanted to play with Xin Air. Coincidentally, Lanzhao Kai had not started to get busy. Lanzhao Kai invited Yang Yi to a club under his name to have tea so that the two little guys could gather and play together. Yang Yi also brought him some specialties from his hometown. Huayang. Yang Yi took the business card that Lanzhao Kai handed over and muttered the name on it. Lawyer Hua, a genius in Jiangqing's legal world. This person specializes in helping people with tricky and difficult cases. He doesn't care about ordinary lawsuits. Of course, his fees are not cheap. Lan Hao Kai introduced him to Yang Yi. At the beginning of last year, he helped me settle a construction site blackmail case. He found the flaws of the other party, collected evidence, and defended in court. This guy, TSK, even my company's legal consultant is in awe of him. Yang Yi kept the business card and prepared to visit him when he was free. Ding Xiang did not stay in her hometown for long. She quickly returned to Zhongqing. As soon as she put down her luggage, she hurriedly changed into her uniform and went to work in the cafe. "Is your grandma's condition better?" Yang Yi asked with concern. Ding Xiang looked better than before she went home. She said gratefully to Yang Yi, "I'm much better now. I took grandma down the mountain and went to the hospital in the city for treatment. Although she couldn't have an operation because she was old and weak, the doctor gave her medicine. Now she can finally get out of bed and walk." The improvement of her grandma's health gave Ding Xiang a lot of encouragement. It also made her feel relieved to study and work hard in Zhongqing. Guazi also came to join in the fun. He actively suggested, "Sister Ding Xiang, since your parents are no longer around, you can bring your grandma to Zhongqing. While the property prices in Tingshan district are not high, you can quickly get a loan to buy a house. You will have a place to stay in Zhongqing and your grandma will have a place to live. You can take care of her nearby." The houses in Tingshan district were not expensive. Zhongqing was a second-tier city. The coastal area was slightly more expensive. The houses there were close to 20,000 yuan per square meter. Tingshan district was vast and sparsely populated. In addition to the distance from the coastal area, the houses there were less than 5,000 yuan per square meter. In Guazi's opinion, as long as Ding Xiang could gather the money for the down payment, the mortgage would not be a problem. Of course, the down payment was a big problem for Ding Xiang. Guazi had already prepared to be generous and lend money to his friend at the cost of his life. However, Ding Xiang shook her head and said, "Our village has a tradition of returning to its roots. Especially now that my grandma is old, she will not be willing to live in the city. It took me a lot of effort to persuade her to go down the mountain to see a doctor. So, it is impossible for her to come to Zhongqing." Guazi scratched his head helplessly and said, "Then buy a house for yourself. I don't see you spending the money you have earned. Keep it in the bank and wait for it to depreciate? Let me tell you, investing in houses is the best way to make money these days." Yang Yi looked at their conversation with interest. At this time, he smiled and said, "Ding Xiang, if you want to buy a house, I can introduce you to him. With his help, it should be no problem to buy a house with the best discount." However, Ding Xiang still shook her head and rejected Yang Yi's kindness. She looked at Yang Yi and Guazi apologetically and said, "I'm sorry, brother Yang Yi. I have other uses for the money I saved. I don't need to think about buying a house." With that said, Yang Yi couldn't persuade her any further. However, Guazi still muttered to Ding Xiang, "What else can you do? You just save it. I haven't seen you spend money anywhere." Lin Mu, An and Ran Jin also came back. Lin Mu, An also came to the coffee shop to work. Seeing that Yang Huan was not there, he also helped to take care of the coffee shop staff while playing the piano. "Xiao Lin, it seems that I have to prepare a uniform for you in the future," Yang Yi said with a smile. Lin Mu An smiled shyly and said, "Brother Yang, this is what I should do. You give me such a high salary and only let me play the piano for an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon. The workload is too little." Even Ran Jin said that I can't live with it. Guazi was eating the wife cake that Lin Mu An brought from Guangdong province. He also muttered to Ding Xiang, "Sister Ding Xiang, this wife cake is delicious. I think you can learn to make it." "And then make it for you?" Ding Xiang exposed him. "Then put it in the shop to sell." Guazi said shamelessly, "Anyway, I will come to support you. Don't worry about not being able to sell it. I saw that it was eaten by you." Guazi complained, "I really think it's delicious. Everyone else also thinks it's delicious. Shi, what do you think?" Shi, who was next to him, was eating happily. Her cute little face was stained with a few sesame seeds. It was unknown how they got there. Hearing Uncle Guazi's question, the little girl raised her head. However, her mouth was full and she was unwilling to open it. She could only nod vigorously. You see. Guazi pointed at Shi and smiled proudly. Shi also likes it. Ding Xiang could only nod and say, since you all like it, then I will study it. At this time, Guazi finally had time. He turned to Lin Mu An and said with a smile, Brother Lin, by the way, today I was at the school's activity center. I saw a poster for a singing competition. I think it's called Singing of Youth. Right now, there are auditions in various provinces and cities. Then, the outstanding contestants will be selected to participate in the Singing of Youth competition. The competition is organized by the TV station and will be recorded into a TV program. I think you can sign up for it. Singing of Youth? I remember that it's a talent show from Xiongnan TV station. Lin Mu An reacted quickly. However, he frowned and said hesitantly, but this competition is too big. It's a nationwide selection of outstanding singers. Can I do it? It doesn't matter if you can or not. You should sign up and give it a try first. Who knows, you might be the champion. Guazi laughed. It was easy for him to say that. How is that possible? In the past, I couldn't even win a competition organized by Zhongqing TV station, Lin Mu An said with a bitter smile. Yang Yi also encouraged him to participate. Actually, I think Guazi is right. No matter the result, you should try hard. Even if you don't succeed, you won't regret it. Moreover, if you can win, not to mention the overall champion, even if it's just a regional champion, I think it's a good result. Lin Mu An was convinced. Chapter 387. Just as Yang Yi and Guazi were encouraging Lin Mu An to participate in the talent show, Murphy had also arrived in Shanghai to film Jixin Interview. It seems like my prediction was quite accurate. It didn't take long for us to meet again. Luo Xian and Murphy met backstage and she gave Murphy a hug as she spoke with a smile. I didn't expect it. I'm still very grateful for Sister Luo Xian's invitation. Murphy smiled shyly. I should be the one thanking you this time. Your influence is not ordinary now. Jixin Interview is riding on your popularity. Luo Xian joked. You're too kind, Sister Luo Xian. Murphy quickly waved her hand. Compared to the past, Murphy no longer gave off a cold feeling. Perhaps it was because she was with Yang Yi and her happiness had diluted the isolation in her heart. However, it was still difficult for Luo Xian to detect the changes in Murphy. After some small talk, the recording of the show began early. Murphy wasn't a young lady, so it was her first time participating in Jixin Interview. She had already participated in one episode of Jixin Interview and was familiar with the process of the show. 6 years ago, she was well prepared and reached the peak of her career with the popular song Strangers. However, she suddenly retired and quickly disappeared from the public eye. Today, 6 years later, she carried the doubts and ridicule of others and returned to the peak with a high-quality album and an amazing voice. January is the carnival of the music industry and also her event. All the spotlights and flashes are shining for her. Some people say that it's a miracle, but I believe that her success came from her hard work and her determination to not give up. Welcome, Murphy, to Jixin Interview again. As usual, Luo Xian gave a long introduction to Murphy. This time, the applause from the audience was much louder. After all, when it came to Murphy, who wouldn't know her? Thank you, Sister Luo Xian. Thank you, everyone. I'm very happy to be invited to Jixin's interview again. Murphy walked out and greeted them politely as usual. Murphy, actually, the last time you came, I was very dissatisfied. This time, after your album was released, I was even more dissatisfied. Do you know why? However, Luo Xian did not play by the rules. After exchanging pleasantries with Murphy, she pretended to blame her. Murphy remembered that she had never seen such a scene in the script. However, she knew that this was one of Luo Xian's characteristics, so she did not panic. She simply asked in confusion, "Why?" "Because the last time I told you that my favorite song of yours is Coming Across the Ocean to See You. This love song is so heart-wrenching. The lyrics express the repressed emotions to the extreme, and your singing also explodes the repressed emotions in the lyrics to the extreme." Luo Xian was first impressed, but then her expression changed. She complained, "But you actually hit an equally good song, Listen to the Sea, which I personally think is even better than I Came Across the Ocean to See You. You only sang First Dream on my show." "Ah, that's the company's arrangement." Murphy finally understood that Luo Xian was jealous. She said awkwardly, "Listen to the Sea is a song that can only be used when the album is released. Plus, First Dream is actually a very good song. But I still like Listen to the Sea." Luo Xian pretended to throw a tantrum. "Then I'll sing this song for Sister Luo Xian tonight. Although the song has already been released, there's no time limit for music, right? As long as it's a good song, even if it's not the first time you sing it, it can still bring joy to everyone." Murphy said as she had an idea. Luo Xian did not intend to make things difficult for Murphy. She was only joking. Since Murphy had found a way, she did not think of a way to help Murphy out. Indeed, music is like wine. It can withstand the test of time. Plus, the longer it lasts, the more mellow it becomes. "Murphy, you said that just now. Later, when it's time for the guest performance, don't sing another song for me," Luo Xian said with a smile. The two of them sang together as if the song had just been confirmed. The audience below the stage was pleasantly surprised. They liked Murphy's song very much and applauded excitedly. The interview continued. Luo Xian asked Murphy how she felt about returning to the top. "Are you very excited? Is this spring festival very happy?" However, Mo Fei shook her head. She smiled slightly and said, "The results I have achieved so far have actually become history. No matter what the media says about me, whether it is good or bad, I can accept it calmly and persevere. I hope that in the future, I can bring more good songs to my fans who like me." I didn't expect Murphy to have such a good attitude. She doesn't indulge in her past achievements, nor is she easily satisfied. She sings conscientiously. This attitude is something that many singers can learn from. Luo Xian was a little surprised. She sighed and said, "I thought that you would be a little proud after being crowned as the Queen of Songs again. I didn't expect you to not be at all." "That's because the title of Queen of Songs isn't reliable," Murphy explained gently. "Sister Luo Xian, look at me. 6 years ago, I was also crowned as the Queen of Songs after receiving a platinum album." Luo Xian had done her homework. She smiled and said, "That's right. Back then, there were many nicknames. For example, Queen of Songs. Maybe it's because I'm not good at communicating with people?" Murphy said embarrassedly. "There's also Queen of Songs, Youngest Queen of Songs, and so on. Now that you think about it, don't you feel that time flies?" Luo Xian sighed. "Indeed, but the title of Queen of Songs doesn't have much use. I left the music industry for about 5 years. When I came back, my popularity had dropped. Many young audience members didn't even recognize me anymore." Mo Fei said to Luo Xian, "So, I've understood something. All the glory I've received now is just history. If I want my fans to continue liking and remembering my work, I have to keep working hard and producing outstanding works." Murphy was not entirely right. There was another phenomenon in the entertainment industry, and that was idol singers. They didn't need to produce excellent works all the time. As long as they showed up frequently and interacted with their fans enthusiastically, as long as they maintained their handsome or beautiful faces, they could continue to be popular. Chao Tsong Tsong was like that before. Murphy actually had the ability to become an idol singer, but her ambition wasn't there. She was usually like the mysterious man and rarely participated in variety shows. Luo Xian knew about it, but she didn't intend to continue on this issue. She didn't want to offend those fans who were obsessed with idol singers, so she smiled and continued Mo Fei's words. Speaking of excellent works, we all know that the reason why Mo Fei's record is so successful is also inseparable from the hard work of a man. Who is Murphy's man? I don't need to say it out loud, do I? Luo Xian turned to the audience and smiled. She was good at adjusting the atmosphere of the show. Suddenly, the audience was very excited and shouted the man's name cooperatively. Mu Xiang. Chapter 388. Luo Xian was actually trying to stir up trouble by asking this question. After all, Murphy's man was a very strong hint. How could Luo Xian not understand? However, this was one of the main features of her show. She constantly dug holes for the guests to see if she could dig out any special information. She was already prepared to explain what she meant if Murphy scolded or refuted her. For example, she would smile and say, "I actually didn't mean that." Isn't there an old saying? Behind every successful man, there is a woman who silently supports him. However, I feel that regardless of gender or special relationship, behind every success, there are many people who support us. However, to her surprise, Murphy did not refute. Instead, she chose to smile and admit it. This also saved her the trouble of trying to lie. She had no idea that Murphy and Mu Xiang, or rather, the person behind this alias, Yang Yi, were actually a couple. At this moment, Murphy's brain short-circuited. Perhaps it was because she spent the spring festival happily at Yang Yi's house that she forgot to hide it. Murphy was stunned for a moment. Then, she pursed her lips and smiled. Yes, Mr. Mu Xiang is indeed the person I should thank the most for achieving such good results this time. Thank you for his support. Murphy did not expand on the support here. Perhaps the audience would think that she was thanking Mu Xiang for his support, but Murphy knew that his support for her was not limited to that. Luo Xian was very smart. Although Murphy did not express it clearly, she could still see some clues from the subtle changes in Murphy's expression. Auntie Luo's beautiful eyes darted around. She smiled and asked, "Murphy, Mu Xiang wrote 12 such classic songs for you. However, what I want to ask is, will you continue to work together for your next album?" "I'm looking forward to it." Murphy was stunned for a moment. She first nodded. Then, she felt that it was a little inappropriate, so she changed her tone and said in an uncertain tone, "We should work together again, right? I really like the songs written by Mr. Mu Xiang. I hope to have more opportunities to work together." However, Luo Xian laughed in her heart. She had gotten the information she wanted. If there was no one behind this, Luo Xian would eat the microphone. On the last episode, Luo Xian had felt that there was something wrong with Murphy's expression. Also, it was unlikely that a stranger would write 12 songs for her just because he liked her voice. Such a statement could not fool someone like her. However, Luo Xian was not in a hurry to take advantage of the situation. Instead, she continued to talk about the topics in the script. After that, it was time for Murphy's performance. Murphy sang "Listen to the Sea," as promised. It was a live version with no lip-syncing. There was only the accompaniment and her real voice. Murphy once again showed the audience her superb singing skills and vocal range. "Listen, it's the sound of the sea crying. Isn't this sea a little too sentimental? It cries until dawn." The audience below the stage couldn't help but shake their heads when they heard Mo Fei's performance. Mo Fei's accent, control of the high notes, and long breath were really intoxicating. After the song was finished, there was a roar of applause. Luo Xian was the same. She kept clapping her hands. Even after she and Murphy sat down on the stage, she could not help but clap her hands and exclaim, "Murphy, you sang this song very well. I remember a music critic said this about you and this song. Let me read it for you." She picked up the card and read it word for word. The song "Listen to the Sea" is very compatible with Murphy. Murphy's voice and singing skills are at the top of the industry. Moreover, from the previous Strangers and Crossing the Sea to See You, Her love songs are very infectious. It can be said that she can move people with just her words. However, the industry has never been able to give a very pertinent evaluation of Murphy because she has never encountered a song like Listen to the Sea that can fully reflect her excellent voice and singing skills. So we can say that Murphy made Listen to the Sea a song, and Listen to the Sea made Murphy. Now, we can finally see a perfect Murphy. Luo Xian raised her head and pointed at Murphy with a smile. She said to the audience, "Moreover, I want to tell you that although the new song period has passed, Listen to the Sea is still at the top of the major charts, the KTV chart, the radio chart, the song sales chart, and so on." The audience below the stage applauded one after another. Their faces were numb from Luo Xian's words. They were very excited and felt a sense of pride. "Thank you." Murphy did not feel much about these honors. She calmly thanked the audience for their applause and then said to Luo Xian with a smile, "Indeed, I am also very grateful to Mr. Mu Ziong for writing Listen to the Sea for me. That's why I said that he is the man who understands you the best. That's not too much, is it? He can write such a song for you that is so compatible with you," Luo Xian suddenly said with a smile. This trick was more obvious. Murphy was not so stupid that she could not see such an obvious trap set by Sister Luo Xian. Luo Xian deliberately made it so obvious. She was also worried that Murphy would jump into the trap she set for the effect of the show and affect her personal relationship with Murphy. Since it was so obvious, Murphy could openly deny it if it was not as ambiguous as Luo Xian thought. However, Murphy hesitated. She wanted to deny it, but she felt that it was against her will. Luo Xian was right. Yang Yi was the man who understood her the best. Although she could not admit or openly confess to the public that he was her man, what did it matter if she hinted a little? Murphy thought that her relationship with Yang Yi would be completely public in a few months, so she gritted her teeth and smiled at Luo Xian as usual. "That's right. Mr. Mu Ziong is indeed more familiar with my characteristics. The song Listen to the Sea he wrote did indeed force out all my potential. Then I guess Listen to the Sea, although it was placed at the end of the album, should also be your favorite song among the 12 songs, right? Let me say first, I like this song the most in this album." Luo Xian looked at Murphy meaningfully, but did not continue to dwell on the original question. It was better not to expose too much. If she dug out all of it, it would be a bit disrespectful to the guests. This level was just right, and it would also be a good topic to talk about. Murphy shook her head and said with a smile, "Sister Luo Xian, if you watch my micro-broadcasting, you should know that I once answered the same question on micro-broadcasting. My favorite song is not Listen to the Sea, but Happy and Unfettered Lament. This song is not difficult, but it has a strong Chinese style." Micro-broadcasting? This is a very popular social media app recently. I know. My assistant helped me register before. Let's follow each other later. It seems that an old woman like me has to keep up with the times. Luo Xian smiled and said, "However, Murphy, you said that Happy and Unfettered Lament is your favorite song, which surprised me. What is the Chinese style you mentioned?" The Chinese style refers to the use of the precious wealth of our traditional culture in the creation of lyrics, classical Chinese or ancient poetry as the main style of rhetoric. Of course, the style of the song is also inclined to the traditional Eastern performance with the addition of our traditional instruments as accompaniment. As she said this, Murphy seemed to become cheerful all of a sudden, and she was tirelessly introducing it to Luo Xian. It seems that our Murphy really likes this type of Chinese-style song very much. However, I also know that Happy and Unfettered Lament has also received very good reviews among music critics. Some music critics even think that this song has opened up a new genre in modern pop music. Mr. Mu Ziong is indeed very talented. He has a variety of creative styles. Not only can he create a masterpiece, but he can also create a sect. This is really rare. Luo Xian exclaimed. While others were praising Mu Ziong, Murphy also proudly puffed out her chest, as if she was also proud of Mu Ziong. Chapter 389. Yang Yi nodded with satisfaction after playing the music accompaniment he had been working on for the whole afternoon. He took off his headphones, plugged the USB into the computer in the center console, and copied the accompaniment. While unplugging the USB and turning off the phone, Yang Yi looked at his watch. It was just in time to pick up Shi, who was already in kindergarten. After coming out of the recording studio, Yang Yi bumped into Xiao Ai. Xiao Ai, who now held an important position in the studio, was also in high spirits. She was dressed like a white-collar elite. Xiao Ai was not like Mo Xiaowan, who could ignore Yang Yi. She did not dare to neglect him. "Boss, are you done?" Yang Yi came to the studio's recording studio to record the accompaniment. Although it was just an accompaniment, he could also record it in a recording studio near the school. However, Yang Yi thought that such a big thing must be done perfectly, so he still chose his studio's top-notch and luxurious recording studio. But doing this in the studio had the risk of exposure, so Yang Yi only informed Xiao Ai. He was still a little worried and said, "Well, it's done. But remember, you must keep it a secret. Don't tell anyone else." Xiao Ai nodded quickly, but she looked at Yang Yi's back and thought with some doubts, "I can't tell anyone else. But doesn't Sister Xiaowan know?" "No, I can't tell anyone else. Sister Xiaowan is the first to know, so I can't tell anyone else." Xiao Ai suddenly realized what Boss Yang meant. Regardless of Xiao Ai's words, Yang Yi picked up Shi from kindergarten. After dinner and tidying up, Yang Yi called Shi in front of him. "Shi, Dad has a big plan tomorrow, and I need your help." Yang Yi squatted on one knee, put his hands on his daughter's shoulders, and said seriously. She couldn't understand her father's seriousness. She blinked her big eyes curiously, gestured with her two small hands, and asked, "What big chicken flower? Is it that big?" Yang Yi was at a loss for words. After a while, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "It's not chicken flowers, it's a plan. Isn't your mother coming back tomorrow? Dad is going to propose to her." "What is a proposal?" She spelled it correctly this time, but she still couldn't understand it. "Proposing is the first step before marriage. Didn't Dad tell you many stories about princes and princesses getting married? But before the wedding, there's still a step to propose. Daddy wants to ask Mommy if you're willing to marry me." Yang Yi patiently introduced to Shi. "Then is a proposal a kiss?" Shi's eyes lit up. She thought of many cases. For example, Snow White was kissed by a prince, and the two got married. Sleeping Beauty was also kissed by a prince, and the two got married. "No, you can't kiss before marriage." Yang Yi became serious. Although he found his own words funny, as a strict father, he had to correct Shi's wrong thinking. He didn't want the little girl to think that she was going to be married after kissing someone. This strict father not only kissed her mother before marriage, but also, back to the topic, Yang Yi spent a lot of effort to explain to Shi what he was going to do tomorrow. In the end, he said, "So, Dad's proposal tomorrow needs your cooperation, Shi. Shi, can you do it?" "Yes," the little girl said crisply. Her face was full of excitement, and she felt that it was very fun. "But Mommy will call you tonight. You can't tell Mommy. This is a surprise for Mommy. If you tell Mommy in advance, it won't be fun." Yang Yi reminded his daughter worriedly. She nodded. She covered her little mouth, and her eyes curved into crescents. She said in a muffled voice, "I won't tell Mom." "Then let's practice today," Yang Yi said, rubbing his hands together. Everything had to be set up first. She curiously followed behind her father like a penguin. She stuck her neck out to watch him fiddle with those things. Finally, Yang Yi held a big basket of rose petals and began to sprinkle them on the stairs, the living room, and the corridor. Finally, he sprinkled a big heart shape on the floor of the living room. Yang Yi took 2 steps back, wanting to see the effect. In the end, he almost stepped on Shi. He turned his head to look at the little girl with big, bright eyes. He didn't care if she understood or not, and explained with a smile, These are temporarily used for practice. We'll clean them up later. Tomorrow, we'll buy fresh rose petals. She really didn't understand. She blinked her eyes and said, But I think it's very beautiful. After setting up, Yang Yi took out the violin that Murphy had given him from the study. He walked out while playing. She sat on the sofa, her two slender legs hanging down. She looked at her father as he walked slowly towards her with a smile on his face, accompanied by the beautiful sound of string music. Yang Yi's violin was melodious. It wasn't like He's a Pirate, which had a very fast rhythm. Instead, the rhythm was very slow. Just like people's love, it didn't need to be vigorous. Instead, it expressed the emotions in a slow melody. The long bowstring was swayed by Yang Yi's arm on the delicate and classical violin. His left hand's fingers pressed on the 4 strings. Every movement was very natural. At this moment, his tall and sturdy figure and tough face seemed to be covered with a soft glow at this moment. It was warm and tender, and it tugged at one's heartstrings. Yang Yi played in front of his daughter while closing his eyes. He carefully felt the nostalgia and love brought by the song. The corner of his mouth couldn't help but curl up into a smile. When the song ended, he slowly put down the violin. Then, he put away the bow and the violin together. How was it? Is it good? Yang Yi smiled at his daughter. She was becoming more and more qualified to appreciate music. When her father was playing, she didn't make any movements. Only when her father asked her did she move. She happily jumped in front of her father and said, It's super good. Papa is also super cool. She likes it so much. The little girl clasped her hands and said sincerely. Yang Yi smiled, reached out his hand and high-fived his daughter. He smiled and said, That's good. Tomorrow, I've decided to use this song. By the way, next, Dad will do this action and then sing a song. Yang Yi gestured for a while, then took out a small box and gestured to Shi. You, tomorrow, hide in Dad's study. When Dad finishes singing, wear your most beautiful dress, come out of the study with a flower and hand it to Dad. Okay. She nodded happily. Now that she had a task, she was full of energy and didn't have to watch from the side. In order to strengthen his daughter's memory so that she wouldn't make any mistakes, Yang Yi took her through the motions. Then let's practice. Daddy is here now. After you finish playing the violin, you can start singing. Okay, Dad is done singing. Yang Yi turned his head and shouted in the direction of the study. You have to take the initiative to come out. Dad won't remind you when the time comes. I know. The little girl tiptoed and opened the door. Then, she ran out happily with the small box. No, slow down, like a lady. At noon the next day, when Yang Yi was still making the final arrangements, the spy in front of him, Comrade Imo Shawan, sent a message. Brother-in-law, we're boarding the plane. We'll be home in 2 hours at most. Get ready. Seeing this message, Yang Yi's heart couldn't help but beat fast. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.